Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. Something gritty, salt-crusted and swaying slightly from side to side. Tonight, we're climbing aboard a medieval ship and heading straight into the dark, damp and delightfully disgusting world of life at sea in the Middle Ages. And just to be clear, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I won't make you walk the plank if you don't. Also, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is right now where you are. I always love seeing where and when we're drifting off together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's just before sunrise. A thick mist lingers above the harbour like a wet wool blanket, and seagulls are already screaming about something, probably the same thing you were about to scream about. You're standing on a rickety wooden dock staring up at what can only be described as a floating box with a single fat sail and ropes going in every possible direction. This is a cog, your new home. The year is 1298, and against all reason, you've agreed to sign on as crew. You step onto the gangplank, and the wood groans in protest, as if it's reconsidering this decision for you, but you're too far in. The moment your foot hits the deck, you smell it. Old salt, fish, tar, and the unmistakable musk of too many people packed into too little space. There's no turning back. The ship is already busy with pre-sailing chaos. Men are tying things, untying other things, shouting words you don't understand, and swinging ropes around with wild confidence. You get a few glances, some amused, some pitying, but no one stops to explain anything. Your first job? Try not to fall overboard before breakfast. You take a tentative walk toward the stern, which you think is the back. The deck creaks under your boots and everything seems just slightly slick. Ropes snake across the planks like lazy vipers, and wooden barrels are stacked haphazardly against the sides. There's no privacy, no space, and absolutely no railings that inspire confidence. Below deck, it's worse. The air is thick, stagnant and damp like a cave no one's bothered to clean for a decade. It's dark, low-ceilinged, and already packed with sleeping bodies, crates, bundles of God knows what, and the smell of mouldy wool and stale breath. This isn't a place you walk through. This is a place you squeeze into and try not to breathe too deeply. You meet your bunkmates. Well, bunk might be generous. It's more like a communal wooden shelf you get to share with 3 other sailors. No mattress, just hay, wet hay. One of the men is missing several teeth, and the other 2 already smell like onions and desperation. One is snoring like a dying donkey. Welcome to the team. Above deck, the captain is barking orders, and finally, the dock lines are released. With a jolt, the cog begins to drift away from the shore. You watch the coastline pull back, slowly turning from stone walls and towers into a vague smudge on the horizon. The wind catches the sail, and just like that, you're officially at sea. There's a sudden shift under your feet. The ship lurches left, then rocks back, and your stomach does a little dance you didn't sign up for. The sea has a rhythm, but it's not a friendly one. The water beneath you is alive, pushing, pulling, breathing in slow, unpredictable heaves. It doesn't care how new you are. One of the older sailors sees your face and laughs. First time? He asks, like he already knows. You nod, trying to act casual while also gripping the side of the ship like it's your last lifeline. Historically, cogs like this were the workhorses of medieval maritime trade, sturdy single-mast ships, wide and slow, with high sides to fend off pirates and waves alike. They weren't meant for comfort, they were meant to not sink immediately. That was pretty much the whole design philosophy. Fun fact, despite their awkward look, these ships revolutionised northern European trade. They could carry far more cargo than their sleeker Mediterranean cousins, which made them favourites among merchants and kings alike. But for the poor souls working on them, well, let's just say no one wrote sonnets about sleeping in the hold. And here's a bit of weird trivia for you. Some sailors believed that knots in the rigging could trap wind, literally. They'd buy magic knots from charlatans promising that if you untied one, the wind would come. 1 knot for a breeze, 2 for a gale, 3 for a storm. Super helpful when you're stuck in a dead calm or trying not to get murdered by Neptune. As the sun rises, you get your first proper look at the sea. It's not romantic. It's a flat grey expanse with little white caps that slap against the hull like they're annoyed. There's no land in sight now, and it hits you. You're stuck here. There's no hopping off, no running up to a tavern. You're a speck of humanity floating in a giant salty abyss. And everything, food, sleep, hygiene, sanity, is now up to the mercy of this damp wooden rectangle. Scholars still argue about just how miserable these voyages were. Some claim the average sailor adapted quickly and even enjoyed the camaraderie. Others insist that conditions were so brutal, disease-ridden and claustrophobic that death at sea was often a relief. Truth is probably somewhere in between, depending on where you were, what time of year it was, and how much you hated rats. As you try to settle into your new role, mostly hauling, tying and trying not to cry, you hear a loud thud behind you. A barrel just came loose and slammed into the mast. No one flinches. Apparently that's just Tuesday around here. You take one last look toward where the land used to be. It's gone now, replaced by waves and wind, and the growing realization that sleep, food and personal dignity are going to become very relative concepts in the days ahead. The ship groans like it's having second thoughts, its timbers flexing and creaking under every wave. You've been aboard for less than a day, and already the novelty has worn off like a wet sock in a boot. You decide to get familiar with your new home, the vessel itself, which seems like a great idea until you realise the ship is not designed for comfort, exploration, or even, frankly, walking upright. You duck under a thick beam and make your way along the narrow deck, trying not to step on any ropes or people. The ship is a cog, wide, slow, and built more like a shipping crate with sails than anything you'd call elegant. It has a single square sail strung from a thick central mast, rigged with lines and pulleys that look like they were designed for maximum confusion. There's a small raised platform at the back, the stern castle, and a slightly smaller one at the front, the forecastle, where a few miserable-looking sailors are trying to scrub something unidentifiable off the wood. Below your feet, the deck is a chaotic patchwork of repair jobs. Every plank tells a story, most of them involving water damage and panic. The wood is uneven, slippery, and vaguely alive with the scent of tar, fish guts, and damp rot. You try to walk in a straight line and promptly stub your toe on a wedge-shaped block the carpenter must have left behind. He growls at you as you hop past. The lower deck, if you can call it that, is an even more tragic affair. It's more crawl space than corridor, crammed with barrels, crates, sacks of grain, and sleeping sailors rolled up like salted herring. The beams are so low you have to bend double, and even then, your head still kisses the wood every few steps. The whole space smells like mildew and armpits, and the occasional rat darts across your foot just to keep your heart rate interesting. There's no designated living quarters. Sailors sleep wherever they can find space that isn't actively soaked, infested, or directly beneath the latrine bucket. Privacy is a foreign concept here. This is communal living in its rawest form. If someone snores, you live with it. If someone smells, you all smell together. You find a small clear patch beside a barrel labelled pickled herring and claim it as your own. Congratulations, you now have real estate. Medieval ships like this were built more for function than human comfort. They were fat-bottomed, short-keeled workhorses, made to haul wool, wine, weapons, whatever needed shipping between ports. Most didn't even have cabins for the crew. If there was any enclosed space, it was reserved for the captain or cargo too valuable to get rained on. Everything else, fair game for the sea, the sun, and whatever was dripping from above. You wander over to the stern castle, where the tiller is mounted. A grizzled sailor is holding it steady, steering with the calm boredom of someone who has made peace with a sea-based monotony. From here you can see the rigging stretching above like a giant's web. A younger sailor is climbing up the ratlines, a rope ladder that looks exactly as dangerous as it feels. Balancing on swaying ropes high above the churning water, you're told to help secure a line and discover that help in nautical terms means do it now or get yelled at. You fumble with the rope, which is stiff and damp and feels like someone rubbed it with sand and despair. Your hands immediately start blistering. The knot you're told to tie is some complicated thing called a rounded turn and 2 half hitches, which sounds like a dance move. You make a lumpy mess and get a boot lightly to the backside as encouragement. Here's your historical fact of the evening. Many of these ships were constructed using the clinker method, overlapping planks fastened together with iron rivets and sealed with tar-soaked wool or moss. This made them flexible and able to ride the waves without snapping in half. It also meant they leaked, constantly. You learn this firsthand when your foot sinks into a puddle that is definitely seawater, definitely not supposed to be there, and definitely very cold. The weirdest part? Ships like these weren't built with blueprints. Not really. Shipwrights used rules of thumb, passed down through apprenticeships and gut instinct. No measuring tape, just exuberance, tradition, and an uncomfortable reliance on good luck. Each cog is kind of a prototype, and that's not what you want to hear when you're floating 100 miles from land. You try to explore the forecastle, where a couple of men are off duty and playing some dice game scratched into a barrel lid. One of them offers you a crude cup of something sour and alcoholic. You sip. Regret immediately follows. It tastes like rotten fruit and vinegar. But hey, it's technically sterile. There's still some debate among historians about how exactly these ships were crewed. Some say cogs needed only a dozen men. Others argue a merchant cog might have had up to 40, depending on the size and purpose. What is clear is that no one got their own space, and every available hand was expected to do a bit of everything. Sail handling, cooking, repairs, cleaning up the mess when a chicken escapes from its crate. Speaking of which, yes, there are animals aboard. Chickens for eggs, maybe a goat if you're lucky. They roam semi-freely, and if you step in something, you try not to ask what it was. The squawk of hens and the occasional angry bleat adds to the chaotic ambience. One of the sailors pulls you aside to tell you in a hushed, serious tone that this ship is cursed. He says it's because someone once painted a pig on the side. Apparently, pigs are bad luck at sea, along with women. Cutting your hair or mentioning rabbits out loud, you thank him, then walk away quickly. You crawl back toward your little hay patch and realise you're already bruised, blistered, and somehow splintered through a leather glove. The ship keeps moving, oblivious to your discomfort. The wind whistles through the rigging above like a distant ghost choir. You hear someone snoring, someone praying, someone swearing at a rope. Everything feels old, damp, and slightly doomed. You lie down, back pressed to the creaky planks, and try to imagine this as the beginning of a grand adventure. But your imagination has limits. You're not sure what wakes you first. The cold creeping into your bones, the sailor beside you muttering in his sleep, or the realization that your bed is essentially a mouldy sack of hay laid directly on the wooden belly of the ship. Either way, you're awake. You blink into darkness so complete it feels like the inside of a barrel. Your neck aches, your hips ache, everything aches. This is your bed now. Welcome to the glamorous world of medieval seafaring. There's no pillow, no blanket, no personal space, just a patch of damp hay that smells faintly of mildew, sea brine and last night's flatulence, none of which came from you, allegedly. The wood beneath you radiates cold like it has an agenda, and the hay does nothing except transfer the chill to your spine with remarkable efficiency. You shift, trying to find a comfortable angle. The ship shifts back as if offended by your optimism. Above you, there's a low beam that you've already bumped your head on twice. On your right, a sailor is snoring directly into your ear, his breath heavy with the scent of dried fish and whatever ale-based nightmare he consumed earlier. To your left, someone just rolled over and elbowed you in the ribs. You don't know his name, and at this point it would be weird to ask. There's something strangely intimate and horrifying about trying to sleep like this. You're packed together like salted meat. No more than a body width between you and the next man. Every sigh, every cough, every twitch radiates through the shared space. You can hear someone's stomach gurgling ominously, someone else is whispering a prayer, and in the distance near the prow, a sailor is softly singing a lullaby, in a language you don't understand. It's oddly beautiful. You almost start to relax, until something scurries over your leg. You bolt upright, or as close to upright as the ceiling allows, a rat of course, just checking in. The rats live here too. They're not shy. In fact, you're the one invading their space. They're plump, fast, and somehow seem cleaner than most of the crew. They dart along the beams, feast on spilled grain, and occasionally crawl into sleeping bags like surprise heating pads. Some sailors call them blessing rats because they eat the weevils. Others try to catch them and make bets on whose rat is faster. You settle back down, attempting to ignore the slow, rhythmic creaking of the ship's hull around you. The planks flex with every wave, producing a chorus of groans, pops, and muffled knocks that sound like the ship itself is muttering curses. Water sloshes somewhere nearby, which you really hope is outside the hull and not inside your bed. Here's your historical tidbit for the night. Medieval sailors didn't have assigned hammocks, not in this era. Hammocks wouldn't become standard until the 16th century with the Spanish Navy. On cogs like this, sleep was floor-based, communal, and entirely dependent on what space wasn't taken up by barrels, sacks, or livestock. Sometimes you got a shared straw mat, sometimes you curled up under the lifeboat, and sometimes, if you were lucky, you got to sleep on top of a pile of rope. which sounds awful, but is oddly more forgiving than wood. The fringe fact: some sailors used to stuff their ears with beeswax or wool before sleeping, not for warmth but to keep out the noise and allegedly the voices of drowned men calling from the sea. You laugh at that, but only a little. The ocean has a way of whispering things if you listen too hard in the dark. You try to sleep again, but the rocking of the ship keeps yanking you halfway upright. It's like trying to nap inside a teetering cart being pushed down a cobblestone road. The waves roll beneath the ship, not violently, but persistently, each one lifting and lowering your body with a nauseating rhythm that never quite settles. Every time you start to drift off, the ship shifts, and your body responds like you've just missed a stair-step. Some crew members snore through it without issue, having grown sea legs long ago. You, on the other hand, are still at war with gravity and your own stomach. You wonder how long it takes before this becomes normal. A week? A month? Never? There's a bit of debate among historians about how much sleep sailors actually got. Some accounts suggest they got decent rest during calm nights, especially when on a rotation. Others insist sleep was broken, brief and often forfeited entirely during storms or high-pressure voyages. The truth is, sleep at sea was a luxury interrupted by duty, noise, pests, or your neighbour's twitchy elbow. Eventually, the exhaustion overpowers everything else. You don't fall asleep so much as slide into unconsciousness like someone turning off a candle. Your dreams are bizarre and unpleasant. Something about drowning in porridge while a rat yells at you in Latin. You're jolted awake a short while later, not by noise this time, but by cold, real, biting cold. You sit up, teeth chattering, and realise your breath is visible in the air. That shouldn't be happening indoors, but you're not really indoors, are you? You're in a floating barn open to the elements, and the temperature drops fast over the open sea. There's no insulation, no fire, just body having the sea. And there's not enough of that to go around. You curl into yourself and try to find warmth, but the straw is damp again, or maybe it never dried. Your clothes cling to your skin like wet paper. Everything smells vaguely sour. You can feel the ship bobbing steadily, and above deck boots thud against the planks. Someone just changed shift. Time passes in choppy increments, counted not by clocks, but by footsteps and rope creaks. You finally give up on sleep. You're too cold, too cramped, and too miserable to pretend. A rat skitters past you again. You whisper a threat. It ignores you. You rise, bump your head, again, and crawl toward the hatch to get some air, if not the dignity. You emerge onto the main deck just as the first pale smudge of dawn creeps over the edge of the world. The wind is sharp and salty, and the sky is a bruised grey pink. You breathe in deeply, and despite everything, there's a strange sense of quiet. The ship rocks under you like it's breathing. The sea stretches endlessly in every direction. You lean on the rail, cold wood against colder hands, and watch as the day begins. For a moment, everything is still. Then someone sneezes behind you, and you're instantly reminded of where you are. Welcome back to the ship. The ship rocks again, more aggressively this time, and you grab the railing as if it might apologise. It doesn't. The sea has gotten choppier since dawn, and while the sky glows in faint pastels, the water underneath is in a foul mood. Sleeping didn't go well, and now the day demands your participation whether you're ready or not. You brace your knees, trying to adjust to the shifting deck, but your stomach is already staging a quiet rebellion. The ocean doesn't roll like a gentle cradle. No, it surges, dips, jerks, and sways with the indifference of a drunk god. The ship follows, groaning and flexing with each wave. The rigging hums and whistles above your head, ropes straining with the rhythm of the wind. You glance upward and feel immediate regret. Just looking at the swaying mast makes your stomach lurch. You were told sleep would get easier after a few days. They did not say anything about mornings. The first few hours after waking are the hardest. Your head is foggy, your limbs are sore, and the movement, the endless, nauseating movement, makes every breath feel like a dice roll. You've heard some sailors say you'll get your sea legs eventually, that your body will adapt, that the nausea will stop. You cling to that hope like a lifeline. For now, though, every tilt of the deck sends your insides sliding into each other like soup in a bowl. You try focusing on the horizon. Supposedly that helps. It doesn't. Below deck, someone's already retching into a bucket. You hear it echoing up through the open hatch. A second later, another sailor joins in and a chain reaction begins. You turn away quickly, trying to breathe through your mouth, which doesn't really help because everything smells like old fish-wet rope and half-digested barley. This is your first attempt at sleeping through a proper night at sea, and clearly your body hasn't forgiven you. The worst part, you're not even in a storm. This is just the normal rhythm of the open sea. The stormy stuff comes later, and apparently that's when things get really fun. You make your way awkwardly across the deck, knees bending more than they should, toes splaying instinctively to maintain balance. You pass one of the more seasoned crew members, an older man with skin like dried leather and a face full of broken capillaries, who smirks at your greenish complexion. "Just don't fight it," he says. "You'll lose every time." The reality is that the human body was never meant to sleep while in motion like this. Not without help, anyway. On land, sleep has consistency. On a medieval ship, it has conditions. If the wind isn't howling, if the waves aren't hammering the hull, if your bunkmate isn't kicking you in his sleep, and if you don't roll directly into a wall beam mid-dream. You got maybe 2 hours last night. Broken, shallow, and filled with dreams of falling off the edge of the world. The debate among scholars is how much rest sailors actually managed. Some argue that their bodies adjusted, developing a rhythm that mirrored the ship's schedule. Others suggest most of them were just constantly sleep-deprived, existing in a zombie-like state between watches. Based on how you feel right now, it's probably the latter. You lean on a barrel, trying to ride out the wave of nausea that's climbing up your spine. Your arms tingle, your jaw clenches. A few feet away, someone casually vomits over the side. The wind carries the sound back to you in loving detail. You close your eyes and will yourself not to join the chorus. One of the quirkiest facts: some medieval sailors believed seasickness was caused not by motion, but by evil winds, bad spirits that lived in the air and attacked your inner balance. Some even wore charms or garlic necklaces to ward off the sick airs. One sailor swears by a piece of iron in his boot. Another wears a rabbit's foot around his neck. You would try just about anything at this point. Eventually you find a moment of uneasy equilibrium. Your legs relax slightly and the queasiness withdraws, just a bit like a predator circling, waiting for its next chance. You breathe deeply and focus on a fixed point on the horizon, exactly like you were told. It's boring, yes, but at least the sky isn't spinning anymore. The sun climbs higher, casting a watery gold across the deck. It's cold, but the light makes things feel slightly more human. Someone hands you a stale piece of bread and a thin broth made from something unidentifiable but warm. You eat slowly, cautiously. The ship lurches again, but the food stays down. For now, a small victory. You find a quiet spot near the side of the ship, wedged between a stack of nets and a crate of salted pork. Here, the wind is calmer, the motion slightly less jarring. You sit back against the crate and close your eyes, not to sleep, but to rest your senses. The sound of the waves slapping against the hull becomes almost hypnotic. You focus on that, letting it wash over you. Just when you start to find some peace, someone shouts from above. A new gust of wind is coming, and the sails need adjusting. You watch as the more agile sailors scramble up the rigging with the ease of spiders, balancing on swaying ropes like it's nothing. You're still trying to remember how to walk without looking drunk, and they're practically flying. One of them drops down next to you and offers a sympathetic smile. "First few days are the worst," she says. "After that, you'll start to feel like part of the ship." You want to believe her. You really do. You eventually rise and return to your duties, or, more accurately, the series of tasks you're vaguely qualified to fumble through. Hauling ropes, checking barrels, helping the cook fish something unholy out of a pot. The work distracts you, thankfully. When you're busy, you don't notice the nausea as much. You're too focused on not screwing up and getting yourself tossed overboard. Later, as the sun begins to dip again, you realise you've made it through a full day. You didn't sleep well, you didn't eat much, and you definitely didn't keep your dignity. But you stayed upright. You didn't throw up in front of the captain, and that, in the grand scale of maritime survival, is a win. You'll try to sleep again tonight. You know it won't be good, but maybe, just maybe, it'll be less bad than last time. The ship rocks, your legs shift to adjust, and just faintly, your brain starts to accept the rhythm. The sea hasn't took one. Not yet. You wake up inside a human stew. That's the best way to describe it. Humid, sour, vaguely meaty, and horrifyingly warm in places it shouldn't be. Your face is mashed against someone's shoulder. Someone else's foot is somewhere near your ribs. There's breath on your neck, and not in the romantic way. You don't know whose. You don't want to know. You try to shift, but the movement triggers a groan nearby. and an elbow slides down across your chest like a sandbag with opinions. This is morning, apparently. The darkness below deck is still thick, even though dawn has clearly broken outside. The only indication that it's a new day is the change in the sounds overhead. Thudding boots, shouted orders, ropes creaking under strain. The wood beneath you is slick again. Either the sea has crept in overnight, or someone relieved themselves in their sleep. You hope desperately it's the first one. You push yourself upright and hit your head for the 4th time on the same cursed beam. It's becoming a personal enemy. You mutter a string of very unholy words as you crawl over 2 snoring bodies and a pile of discarded sacks to reach the ladder. Every movement is deliberate now, calculated to avoid bruising, slipping, or getting tangled in someone's belt. One sailor, half awake, grunts something that might be a greeting or a threat. You don't ask for clarification. By the time you reach the deck, the sun is clawing its way above the sea, the sky a pale wash of peach and pewter. It's colder than you expect. The wind slices through your clothes, sticky from yesterday's sweat and last night's condensation. You take a breath and instantly regret it. Some combination of wet wood, stale beer, and old socks invades your lungs. You're beginning to understand something no one warned you about. Medieval sailors didn't really wake up. They just slowly returned to consciousness in a continuous cycle of half-sleep, labour and regret. You blink at the horizon and feel your body creaking in protest. Muscles you didn't know existed ache. Your skin feels dry and damp at the same time. You're not sure what day it is, and even if you knew, it wouldn't matter. Time out here is measured in rope coils, wind shifts, and the increasingly vague hope of land. The watch bell sounds. One of the senior sailors, one with a permanent scowl and eyebrows like tangled brush, nods at you. "Back on deck," he grunts. Not a question. You nod back because your mouth isn't fully functional yet. Before you can even think about working, you need food, or something vaguely pretending to be it. Below deck, the cook is already growling over a pot. He's an enormous man with grease-polished hair and arms like tree trunks. He doesn't speak much. He just gestures at you with a ladle, and you know better than to ask questions. Breakfast is served. A lump of something greyish, grainy, and suspiciously room temperature. Maybe porridge. Maybe it used to be porridge. It sits heavily in a wooden bowl, accompanied by a crust of hard bread that could shatter a skull. You nibble. It tastes like nothing and still manages to be offensive. The bread is covered in tiny black specks. Weevils. You flick them off with minimal ceremony and bite in. The rest of the crew doesn't even bother. They just eat the bugs. Protein, one says with a grin full of half-chewed misery. The porridge sticks to your teeth like wet sand. You swallow hard and chase it with a sip of something vaguely resembling beer, which is really just warm, weak ale. It's sour, flat, and probably safer than the water on board. Most sailors avoid water entirely. Stored in wooden barrels and constantly exposed to heat and bacteria, it goes bad fast. The ale, at least, has alcohol to kill off the worst of the germs and numb the taste of breakfast. You sit on a crate and try to eat slowly, but your body demands calories, and your stomach has no taste standards left. A rat scuttles nearby. It pauses, makes eye contact, and then disappears under the barrels. You nod at it like an old acquaintance. You've accepted its presence. You have no choice. Here's your historical nugget for the morning. Breakfast at sea was rarely more than hardtack, those brick-like biscuits made from flour and water, baked until all hope had died inside them. Sometimes there was gruel, sometimes cold meat, but usually it was hardtack, sometimes softened in broth or ale. Sailors even invented worm soup, a joke term for what happened when you soaked a worm-riddled biscuit in liquid and pretended not to notice the floaters. And here's the fringe fact. Some sailors developed methods to test whether the biscuit was still edible by dropping it on the deck. If it shattered, it was fresh. If it bounced, well, best not to ask. There's still debate among historians about just how miserable the daily meals were. Some records suggest that provisions were carefully planned and at times quite generous, especially on royal or merchant vessels. Others describe famine conditions, with sailors drawing lots or gnawing on leather when supplies ran out. But one truth is consistent: the longer you were at sea, the worse the food got. Mice, mould and rot were inevitable travelling companions. After breakfast, you stow your bowl and head back above deck. The sun is higher now, casting everything in a clean, golden light that makes the sea look deceptively inviting. You stretch your arms, your back cracking like firewood. A gull shrieks overhead and circles the mast like it's considering moving in. The wind is steady, pushing the cog westward in a rhythmic sway that your legs are beginning to understand. You're adapting. Slowly, painfully, but adapting. You return to your spot at the rail, squinting out at the endless water. Another day has begun, and the world is a flat circle of sea and sky. There's no schedule, no privacy, just the sound of rope, wind, and the never-ending chorus of groaning timber. Sleep will come again, but you already know what it'll be like. Another night in the human soup, chased by rats and dreams of dry land. Still, this morning didn't kill you. That's something. The first meal of the day is settling in your stomach like a handful of gravel, and the crew is already back to shouting, swearing, and hauling things up and down the length of the deck. You're assigned to assistance duty, which basically means you do whatever job no one else wants. That includes, apparently, standing next to a barrel and holding a coil of rope while someone else does the actual work. But hey, you're involved. Around mid-morning, the cook rings his iron pot like a bell, a charming touch considering he also uses it to cook fish heads. That sound, miraculously, signals the next moment everyone on the ship both looks forward to and dreads, the main meal. Not lunch, not exactly, just the meal. One of only two you'll get today. Everyone flocks to the centre of the deck like hungry seagulls with severe vitamin deficiencies. The food is already waiting in a series of battered wooden bowls. You grab yours from the cook's table, and inside is, well, let's just say it has colour, which is an improvement. Pale pinkish chunks of something that might once have been pork float in a brown, greasy broth with shards of carrot, or maybe it's turnip. There are definitely some onions. It smells aggressively salted, smoked, and slightly burnt. You take a bite, and your teeth struggle. Salt pork. So heavily cured it could survive the apocalypse. It's been soaking overnight to soften it, kind of, but it still has the texture of the meat that forgot what tenderness was several centuries ago. You chew and chew and chew. Eventually the pork surrenders, sort of. You fish out a piece of biscuit from your satchel. The same dense hardtack from this morning, now slightly softened by being kept next to your sweaty shirt all day. You dip it in the broth and call it innovation. It tastes like survival. Salt pork is the backbone of the medieval sailor's diet. It's durable, cheap, and utterly devoid of joy. Paired with dried peas, beans, or root vegetables, it becomes something resembling stew if you squint hard and lower your standards. That's assuming the cook isn't rationing too tightly or dealing with half-rotten supplies. And by this point in the journey, half of the food barrels have already started to grow fur. You finish the meal, more because you need the calories than out of any real desire. The salt sticks in your mouth, leaving a dry film on your tongue. You try another sip of ale, not because it's delicious, but because it's the only fluid that doesn't taste like barrel slime. One sailor says he saw something swimming in the water barrel yesterday. No one investigates. After eating, you help clean the bowls with seawater, which is as effective as it sounds. Everything is vaguely sticky and now smells like fish. A seagull lands on the edge of the ship and eyes you hungrily. You stare back. If it tries to take your biscuit, you'll fight it. You have very little left to lose. The salt content in everything is starting to show its effects. Your lips are dry and cracked. Your hands, already blistered from rope work, are stiff from dehydration. You'd give a small fortune for a glass of fresh water and an orange, but you're not on a cruise. You're on a floating salt box, and scurvy is lurking like a smug ghost just out of sight. One of the older sailors jokes that he can taste colours now, which probably isn't a good sign. Another says if the pork gets any saltier, it'll cure him from the inside out. You all laugh, not because it's funny, but because the alternative is thinking too hard about what your body's going through. Historical sidebar. Salt pork was essential in medieval maritime life because it could last for months if packed properly in barrels, but the amount of sodium it delivered daily would shock a modern doctor. Combine that with hardtack, dried legumes and occasional bits of preserved fish and you've got a diet that keeps you alive but just barely. And here's the weird part. Sailors sometimes liked it. Or at least they convinced themselves they did. One written account describes a sailor who claimed the salt pork strengthened the bones and sharpened the temper, which might be a poetic way of saying it made everyone irritable and prone to fistfights. There's a scholarly debate over how much variation there really was in shipboard meals. Some suggest that captains with larger budgets, or voyages backed by wealthy merchants, had better supplies: spices, dried fruits, even small casks of wine. Others argue that outside of a few elite ships, the food was universally miserable, especially on longer trips. Either way, you're not seeing any raisins or cinnamon sticks today. Afternoon work resumes quickly. No one really rests. The ship doesn't wait for digestion. You're told to help scrub the deck, which is less about cleaning and more about smearing seawater across the boards with a fraying broom. Someone spills a bowl of broth, and the cook roars like a wounded bear. The rest of the crew laughs. You smile politely and back away. The heat builds as the sun climbs. The deck becomes a frying pan and the salted sweat pours off you. Your shirt sticks to your back. Your legs are sore from constant bracing against the sway of the sea, and the salt, always the salt, is in your eyes, your mouth, your fingernails. You are in every sense becoming part of the ship. Dried, crusted, preserved. You lean against the railing and stare out at the sea, trying to convince yourself you're full. You're not. Not really. The food fills space, but it doesn't satisfy. There's no warmth to it, no comfort. Just the cold efficiency of nutrition, if you can call it that. Still, you've gotten it down, it's stayed there. That's a win. You've even stopped gagging at the sight of hardtack. Progress is. A few sailors are already talking about dinner, even though it's hours away. Just more pork, more biscuit. Maybe if you're lucky, a single onion will make a guest appearance. But it's something to look forward to, sort of. You sigh and turn back to your duties, wondering how your ancestors ever romanticised the sea. The food alone is enough to make you question everything. The taste of salt pork is still lingering in your mouth, hours later, like an uninvited guest who doesn't know when to leave. It's not even flavour anymore, just residue. A thick, greasy memory clinging to your tongue, the back of your throat and your dignity. You've tried rinsing it away with weak ale. You've even tried chewing on a piece of rope just for the texture change. Nothing helps. And the worst part. Dinner will be more of the same, salt pork, biscuit, repeat forever. There's no menu on a medieval ship, you eat what's there, and there is not exactly an inspiring place. You've already learned that the pork is tough, the biscuit is tougher, and the rest of the meal is just rehydrated sadness. Some days you get dried peas or lentils to break up the monotony. Those are the good days, days worth celebrating. You still remember the one time someone dropped a turnip into the stew pot and people nearly wept. But most of the time, it's the same cycle. Salt pork and hardtack for lunch, and then, surprise, salt pork and hardtack for dinner. Sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's colder. Occasionally it's boiled with a handful of barley or seaweed someone swears is edible. You don't ask too many questions anymore. You're learning the art of edible creativity. Some sailors soak their biscuit in ale to soften it. Others use their teeth like chisels to carve off bite-sized chunks. A few particularly grim souls just suck on the corner until it gives up and becomes mush. You've watched this process. It's not pretty, but it's effective. Like most things at sea, it's not about enjoying, it's about surviving. The weevils are a constant, by the way. Tiny black bugs that burrow into the hardtack and nestle in like they paid rent. You don't even flinch anymore when one crawls across your hand. You just flick it away and keep eating. Or don't flick it at all. Most of the crew eats them. They call it meat seasoning. That's not a joke. That's just what desperation looks like. There's a trick some sailors use. Break the biscuit in half and hold it near a lantern. The heat draws the weevils out. They crawl to the surface and scatter, and you brush them off. Then you eat what's left. If you're too hungry to wait for the weevil migration, you eat them too. Crunchy, nutty, weirdly bitter. You stop thinking about it after a while. The salt pork doesn't escape judgment either. It's usually packed in barrels so old the wood stinks of meat and brine. The pork inside floats in a murky, gelatinous soup that no one questions anymore. Sometimes the meat is grey. Sometimes it's green. You scrape off the worst of the mould, slice it thin and toss it into the pot. Boiling kills everything. Or at least that's the hope. Here's your historical anchor for this section. Salt pork and hardtack made up the majority of calories consumed by sailors on long voyages from the 13th century through the early modern era. They were cheap, durable, and crucially survivable. Stored in barrels and sacks, they could last months, if you didn't mind that they aged like old leather shoes. And now for the quirky fact of the night. Some sailors actually preferred biscuit with weevils, claiming the bugs added a softness that the hardtack lacked. One ship's journal even describes a crew member who would select the biscuit with the most movement, believing it to be fresher, which is exactly the kind of logic you develop after 3 weeks of salted misery. There's still scholarly disagreement about how often sailors were truly malnourished on these journeys. Some argue the food was decent for the time, especially when compared to the average peasant's diet on land. Others point out that by week 3, the vitamin deficiency kicked in hard and the smell of scurvy breath started drifting across the deck like a curse. You've already heard whispers about bleeding gums and loose teeth from the older men. They joke about it now, but it's not far off. The lack of fresh vegetables and citrus means the crew's immune systems are basically holding on by a thread. Your own gums feel tender lately, and you've got a little sore on your lip that hasn't healed. You tell yourself it's nothing. You try not to think too hard about the ship's stores. The barrels are disappearing one by one. Every time the hold gets a little emptier, a new wave of anxiety passes through the crew. Rations have already been cut once, just too slightly, but enough that you noticed. One fewer biscuit, a thinner broth. The men didn't say much, but the silence around the cooking pot spoke volumes. Tonight's dinner is, predictably, salt pork stew, a little thicker than usual with something that might be dried apple shavings tossed in. Maybe someone traded with another ship at the last port. Maybe the cook found it under a sack. Maybe it's just stringy onion that smells weird. No one asks, you just eat it, because it's warm and it's something in your stomach, and that's enough. The wind picks up as the sun lowers, casting long shadow paws across the deck. The rigging creaks overhead, and the ship leans slightly into a new direction. You eat with your bowl braced against your knees, keeping it steady with one hand as the ship rocks unpredictably. A splash of broth spills onto your boot. You scrape it up with your fingers. No sense wasting it. Afterward, you rinse your bowl with cold seawater and hang it back on its hook. Another day, another identical meal. One sailor sighs and mutters, "I'd kill for a roast chicken." Another responds, "I'd kill just to remember what one smells like." You nod, because honestly same, but you've noticed something strange too, something you wouldn't have believed before this voyage. Even with the bugs, even with the salt, even with the endless repetition, your body is slowly adjusting. Your stomach doesn't protest as much. You've stopped gagging at the sight of greasy pork. Your cravings for soft bread and fresh fruit have dulled into background noise. You're not comfortable, but you're surviving. And at sea that counts for a lot. You're thirsty. Not the grab a glass of water kind of thirsty, the dry, sticky, bitter kind that settles into your mouth and throat like a second skin. The kind where you dream about cool rivers and morning dew, and when you wake up, your tongue feels like it's been coated in dust and rope fibres. You don't even remember the last time you drank water. Real water. The kind that's clear, cold, and doesn't smell like the inside of a boot. Instead, there's ale. Always ale. Weak, flat, sour, and barely alcoholic. More of a fermented barley tea than anything that could earn the name beer. It's not there for fun. It's survival. Every cup is warm, slightly foamy, and just bitter enough to remind you that joy is dead. But it won't kill you. Unlike the water, the barrels of fresh water on board are old and suspect. They were sealed tightly back in port, but now, weeks in, the wood has started to warp. The staves creak, the lids don't sit quite flush. When opened, the smell that wafts out is complicated. You once looked inside one. The liquid was brownish. A film floated across the top like it had its own ecosystem. One sailor dipped a ladle in, sniffed it, shrugged, and drank it anyway. You were too horrified to stop him. He's still alive somehow, but most of the crew avoids it. There's a superstition too that bad water brings madness. A kind of rot in the mind, they say, that begins with a headache and ends with you throwing yourself off the side, eyes wild and mouth foaming. You don't know if that's true, but you haven't seen anyone drink straight water since you left port, and no one looks particularly sane, so maybe they're onto something. So you drink ale. Morning, noon and night. It's rationed, of course. 1 cup per meal. 2 if the day's been especially cruel, which is most days. You sip it slowly, feeling the sourness bite at the back of your throat. It doesn't quench thirst, not really. It just delays it. You try not to think about it too much, because thinking leads to wanting, and wanting leads to misery. The thirst sneaks up on you. You sweat it out while working, pulling ropes, scrubbing planks, hauling supplies, and you never really get it back. It stays with you, low and dull, like a background ache. You learn to live with it. Everyone does. The sailors joke about it sometimes. We drink to forget we're thirsty, they say, and then laugh in that empty way that doesn't involve their eyes. Historically, ale was absolutely vital on board. Not because it was delicious or refreshing, but because it was safer than water. The brewing process killed off a lot of the harmful bacteria, and it could be stored in barrels for weeks without spoiling completely. The alcohol content was low enough to avoid intoxication, but high enough to ward off disease. Barely. You weren't drinking to get drunk, you were drinking to not die. The weirder part? Wine, if available, was worse. Red wine turned to vinegar within days. White wine disappeared even faster. If you were lucky, you might have had a small cask of brandy or spirits reserved for medicinal use, or to bribe an angry port official, but for daily hydration, it was ale or nothing. And sometimes, even the ale betrayed you. One barrel, opened earlier this week, had gone off completely. The smell made someone vomit on the spot. It had turned thick, sour and sludge-like, and was quickly dumped overboard to a chorus of groans. That was a light day, food-wise. You just tried not to remember what thirst felt like. There's a growing debate among historians about whether sailors really drank ale exclusively, or whether they sometimes drank seawater out of desperation. Officially, the answer is no. Salt water dehydrates you further and can cause hallucinations, organ failure, and death. Unofficially, yes, people tried, especially those who were already unwell or panicked. You've overheard a story of a man who filled his boot with seawater and drank it when no one was looking. They say he was dead 2 days later, covered in sores and screaming about land that wasn't there. You believe it, you've thought about it. You haven't done it, but you've stood at the railing more than once, staring down at the shimmering surface, wondering what it would taste like. Just a sip. Just to know. Instead, you ration. You count your sips. You drink the ale in slow gulps, warming it in your mouth first to dull the bitterness. You catch the drips that run down your chin with your sleeve. You even lick the inside of your bowl after every meal, desperate for any trace of moisture. The cook sees you. He says nothing. Some of the crew tries to trick the system. They chew on damp ropes, suck condensation from the walls of the hold, or gather rainwater with scrap cloth when the skies allow. It's frowned upon, but not punished. Everyone understands. Everyone's felt the same grit behind their teeth, the same heat in their throat, the same burning in their eyes from too many dry days. Then there are the superstitions. Oh, the sailors love their rules. Never mention thirst out loud. Never say the word parched on deck. Don't clink your cup against the barrel. Don't drink with your left hand. Don't spill. Definitely don't spill. One sailor tripped last week and lost half a cup. The silence that followed was bone deep. No one spoke to him for hours. You start counting the days based on how many cups you've had. A good day, 3. A bad day, 2. A cursed day, 1. And only because the barrel lid was stuck. You've learned to plan your thirst. You eat less to reduce it. You talk less. You spit less. You even try to sweat less, though the sun and the labour don't cooperate. By evening, your lips are cracked. Your mouth feels like it's lined with parchment. You sip your final cup of the day, lukewarm, slightly metallic, and hold it in your mouth as long as you can. You close your eyes and try to imagine the sound of a stream or rain, or a jug being poured into a cup, but nothing comes. Your brain is too dry for imagination, and still, the sea rolls on. Infinite water, none of it drinkable. You're surrounded by the thing you need most, and you can't have a single drop. That's the cruelest part. You stare at the ocean and swallow, your throat rasping like dry wood. Tomorrow, maybe there'll be a little rain. Maybe. Eventually the question hits you, not in a poetic, philosophical way, but in a very urgent, practical one. Where do you go to the bathroom? It's the kind of detail no one talks about in the songs. All those romantic sea ballads with their oaths and oceans and stars above, they never mention the part where you're halfway up a rope ladder and realise that you, quite desperately, need to relieve yourself. And let's just say, on a medieval ship, the answer is as inconvenient as you feared and twice as humiliating. So here's how it works. There is no toilet. There is no head, as you might have heard in modern seafaring terms. There's a plank. Yes, a literal plank. Sticking out from the side of the ship like a sad diving board for your dignity. It's known affectionately and sarcastically as the Seat of Ease, which might be the most misleading name in the history of human infrastructure. The Seat of Ease is a narrow wooden board extending from the foredeck near the bow. No privacy, no railing, no second chances. You squat with your rear facing open ocean, clutching onto a fraying rope with one hand and your soul with the other. Below you, waves crash violently against the hull, and the wind, the wind whips right under your tunic like it's trying to steal your ancestors. One strong gust and it's all over. Literally. You quickly learn that timing is everything. You don't use the seat of ease in rough weather unless you're especially brave or especially foolish, and you certainly don't do it after dark, unless you want to become a cautionary tale for future sailors. One man fell in last week. They didn't even try to fish him out. Just a quick prayer, then back to work. The sea takes what it wants. As far as urination goes, that's slightly easier. You just pick a side, stand near the rail and go for it, preferably downwind. There's no modesty at sea. You're constantly surrounded by other men who have long since stopped pretending to care. You've peed beside the captain. You've peed beside a man asleep with his head in a bucket. You've even peed beside a chicken. That chicken's name is Gertie. She's seen things. Here's your historical fact. Sanitation aboard medieval ships was virtually non-existent. The idea of a proper latrine didn't arrive until much later, and even then it was usually reserved for officers. Everyone else made do with planks, buckets, or just leaning over the side and hoping the wind was merciful. It was not only unsanitary but genuinely dangerous. Many sailors drowned not in storms or battles, but in quiet, humiliating accidents while answering nature's call. There's a curious fringe fact too. In some parts of the medieval maritime world, sailors believed that relieving oneself near the prow of the ship where the figurehead watched over the waters would anger the sea spirits. One tale tells of a sailor who spat near the bow after using the plank and was struck by lightning the same evening. Whether it's true or just a well-timed bit of folklore, no one goes near the prow when they can help it. Superstition doesn't have to make sense, it just has to stick. There's a scholarly debate surrounding how often disease spreads specifically due to these sanitation practices. Some argue that the close quarters and lack of hygiene were the perfect breeding ground for dysentery, typhoid and other gastrointestinal disasters. Others suggest that sailors, through sheer necessity, developed survival instincts that mitigated some of the worst outcomes. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, soaked in seawater and regret. Back aboard your own cursed vessel, you've developed a routine. You use the plank early, before most of the crew is awake, when the air is still and the sea relatively calm. You wait until you're sure no one is watching, then make the delicate balancing act across the damp wood. Pants half down, dignity held loosely in one hand. You squat, breathe deeply, and pray to whatever god might be listening that you don't sneeze or hiccup. Sometimes you wonder if there's a better system. A bucket, maybe? Well, there is a bucket, but it's communal. One is usually kept below deck for emergencies, and by emergencies, they mean storms or illness. It's not cleaned often. No one likes it. When the bucket is full, or when someone finally has the nerve, it gets dumped overboard with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for burials. And let's not forget seasickness. On rough days, when the ship bucks like a wild horse and the horizon dances like a drunk jester, the bucket becomes a battleground. Between vomiting, urinating, and the occasional nervous accident, it's a miracle anyone keeps their pants on at all. Some don't. One unfortunate soul new to the crew made the mistake of waiting too long. The story goes that he was working the rigging far above the deck when the urge hit him. There was no time, none, and so he chose the only option available, right then, right there, over the side. The wind wasn't in his favour. He learned a valuable lesson that day. So did everyone below. You start to think of the sea not as a romantic expanse, but as a never-ending bathroom break waiting to go wrong. It's funny, in a grim way. There's endless water, but nothing clean. Endless wind, but no privacy. Endless motion, but nowhere to go. And somehow you still manage to get on with it. Because what choice do you have? You adapt. You learn to read the waves before stepping out. You brace your legs like a sailor born. You time the squat with the rhythm of the ship. It's like a dance, like a horrible, breezy, vaguely humiliating dance, but one you get better at with every passing day. By nightfall, the ship quiets again. The sea calms, the wind softens, and the crew settles in for another restless sleep. Below deck, the bucket waits in the corner, ominous and gently sloshing. You avoid eye contact, you curl into your patch of hay, eyes burning, stomach churning faintly, and think, not for the first time, that land has never sounded so perfect. With real walls, real toilets, real privacy. You sigh, close your eyes, and hope the ship doesn't rock too much tonight. The rigging is calling your name, though not in the friendly way. It calls like a sore muscle reminding you it's still there, like a rope burn you didn't feel until an hour after it happened, like a blister that has opinions. It's time to work again, and this time it's the sails. You're still new enough that climbing into the rigging feels like a dare. It's not just high, it's high and moving, which is a particular kind of insult to human biology. The rope ladder, or ratlines as the veterans call them, stretches upward from the deck like a web spun by a spider with zero regard for gravity. Above, the sail flaps violently in the wind, snapping and billowing like it's trying to break free and go live its own life. Someone hands you a length of coiled rope and a glance that says, "Try not to die." You nod like you're brave, but your stomach is already asking if this is really necessary. You start climbing. The ratlines sway with the ship, moving side to side, up and down, like you're scaling a drunken tree in a storm. Every step is a gamble, every reach a stretch between life and the laws of physics. Your hands, already raw from earlier duties, scream in protest. The rope is rough, stiff with salt, and frayed in places that matter. You tell yourself not to look down. You look down. Big mistake. The deck seems absurdly far away. And the sea beyond it? Infinite. You're a speck on a speck floating through a blue-grey abyss, clutching twine and prayer. The wind pushes at your back like it's bored and wants to see what happens when you fall. Your heart pounds, your breath shortens, your arms burn, but you keep going. The task is to adjust the mainsail. It's caught wrong, too much slack on the starboard side, and the wind's shifted direction. If it's not corrected, the ship won't sail efficiently. Or worse, the mast could strain under uneven pressure, and then it's a whole situation. You're not entirely sure what you're doing, but you've been shouted at enough times to at least fake it. Another sailor is already up there, older, faster, and balanced like a cat on a beam. He nods at you and gestures toward a knot that's slipping. You crawl toward it on a thick wooden spar, the yardarm clutching it between your thighs and inching along like a terrified squirrel. The sail thrashes below you, loud and violent. Your body screams, but you grip the rope, tug it tight, and loop it twice through the block. "Secure it," the sailor shouts. You tie the knot the way they showed you, clumsily, with fingers that don't quite believe in themselves. It holds. Somehow, you breathe, just once, then begin the slow, miserable crawl back. Historically, sail handling on cogs was both essential and dangerous. These ships were simple by modern standards, one mast, one square sail, but the work required to manage that single sail could be brutal. Adjusting for wind meant constant vigilance and quick action. In storms, men were lashed to the yard to prevent them from being blown overboard. Falls were common, deaths were accepted. You make it back to the ratlines, then down to the deck, legs trembling, palms bleeding slightly where the rope bit in. The sailor from above jumps down beside you with ease, landing like gravity's never been his problem. He slaps your back hard enough to rattle your teeth and grins. Not bad for a land rat. You smile back, mostly out of relief that you're still alive. Of all the tasks on the ship, working the rigging might be the most physically punishing. It's constant climbing, balancing, tying, untying, watching and sweating. The wind never stops. The sails never stop needing adjustment. And if a rope snaps or a knot fails, you can bet someone will be flying, not in the majestic eagle-like way, but more of a ragdoll over the ocean vibe. There's an open debate among nautical historians about how skilled medieval sailors really were in sail management. Some argue that, due to the simplicity of cogs, crews didn't need advanced training, just brute strength and a willingness to climb. Others insist that even with just one sail, the variables of wind, tide and weight distribution demanded serious expertise. Judging by your burning arms and the knot you tied out of sheer terror, you're leaning toward the second view. And here's a quirky little fact. Sailors used to assign nicknames to the ropes, not technical names, but personal ones. Old Snake, Widow's Whip, the Hanger. Supposedly, if you respected the rope and called it by its name, it wouldn't bite you. But if you mocked it or treated it poorly, well, you'd better know how to swim. You haven't started naming ropes yet, but you're beginning to see the appeal. Back on deck, the boatswain bellows another order, and you jump to assist with the halyard. That's the rope that hoists the sail. You haul it with the others, muscles straining until the canvas snaps taut above. Then you tie it off and step back panting. Your shirt clings to your back with sweat. Your hair is stiff with salt. Your hands are trembling just slightly. And yet, there's something in it. Something primal. You look up at the sail, full, billowing clean against the sky, and realise you helped shape that. You made the ship move. Not with an engine, not with buttons or charts, but with rope, wind, and your own sore, blistered hands. You lean against the mast and let the breeze cool your face. The rigging creaks overhead. The sails snap with purpose. The ship surges forward. You're still not a sailor. Not really. But you're starting to understand the rhythm. Hierarchy at sea isn't subtle. You learn that fast, long before anyone explains it. You don't need a chart, you just need to look at the boots. That's where the truth lives. The captain's boots, polished, expensive, barely scuffed, like the fact they've never seen a proper storm. The boots of the men on deck, scuffed to hell, split at the toes, soaked in salt water and pig blood. One man's boots are actually just rags tied around his feet. You're somewhere in the middle, and trust me, it matters. On land, you might guess someone's rank by their house, their family name, maybe their beard. Out here, it's the way they walk, who they yell at, and who's forced to listen. The captain is easy to spot, though you rarely see him. His name is Captain Elowin, not much of a shouter, not much of a talker, honestly. He's got a slow walk and a sharp eye, like someone who's always thinking 3 disasters ahead. He doesn't bother with most of the crew unless you're causing problems, and even then, he's not the one who speaks to you first. That job falls to the first mate. Ah, yes, the first mate. That would be Master Rankin, a man who treats shouting as both an art form and a form of exercise. If something's going wrong, he's already screaming about it. If something's going right, he's preemptively screaming about how you'll probably ruin it. He's not cruel exactly, just built entirely out of tension and high blood pressure. You've been personally insulted by him at least 6 times already today. That probably means you're doing fine. Below them, there's a whole mess of shipboard roles that at first feel interchangeable. The bosun, or bosun, the carpenter, the cook, the sailmaster, and a few others who mostly grunt and curse and seem to know what they're doing. Then there's you and the rest of the crew, hanging out at the very bottom like barnacles on the hull doing whatever's needed, whenever it's yelled. What no one tells you is that these roles aren't just about responsibility. They're about who eats better, who sleeps longer, who gets dry clothes first. If the stew has an actual piece of meat in it, it goes to the captain. If there's rainwater collected in a clean bucket, it's for the bosun. If there's an argument over space below deck, guess who gets pushed out of the dry spot? Hint, it's not Master Rankin. You've managed to befriend the carpenter, well, not befriend so much as sit near him long enough without talking that he doesn't actively hate you anymore. His name is Ansel, and he's one of the few aboard who doesn't raise his voice. He's always working, hammering, patching, inspecting the ship's bones like a surgeon. His cabin, the only space that remotely resembles a cabin, is cramped and smells like sawdust and oil, but it's dry and quiet, and on rare occasions when you're soaked to the bone and desperate, he lets you sit in the doorway and drink from his personal stash of ale. He never says why. The carpenter holds real power on a medieval ship which you wouldn't guess until something breaks, which it always does. A cracked mast, a warped hull plank, a loose rudder pin. If Ansel can't fix it, you're dead in the water. Literally. Even the captain defers to him when things get bad. Then there's the cook, the least patient man aboard. His name is Dorgin, and he's built like a barrel with arms. He doesn't take orders from anyone but the captain, and even that seems flexible. He feeds the crew, controls the rations, and decides who gets that second scrap of biscuit when everyone's too tired to argue. He also knows every rumour aboard before they spread, and has been known to deny food to anyone who crosses him. You've learned to stay on his good side. Praise the stew. Never ask what's in it. But it's the bosun who you deal with most often. His job is to relay orders from above, and beat sense into anyone who's slow about following them. He carries a rope's end on his belt, not decorative. You've seen him use it. He's the kind of man who smells like salt and sweat and chews something unidentifiable between his back molars. He has a good memory for mistakes, and you're still trying to erase your early ones. The rest of the crew is a mix of lifers and landleavers like you. Some are here because they love the sea. Others are here because the sea was the better option compared to whatever was waiting back on shore. Debts, enemies, jail. You haven't asked too many questions. They haven't asked about you. It's an unspoken rule. No backstories unless you're dying or drunk. Here's your historical anchor tonight. Medieval ships had clearly defined command structures, though not always as rigid as modern naval ranks. The captain held authority, sure, but often more as a figurehead unless they had experience. Real control could lie with the first mate or the bosun. especially during emergencies. Many decisions were made collectively by senior crew members, especially on merchant ships where profit, not protocol, was king. As for the fringe fact, in some ports sailors hired onto ships not just by skill, but by personality. Captains would avoid recruiting hot bloods, men prone to brawling or back talk, especially on long voyages. There are records of shipmasters turning away strong, able-bodied men because they could not endure their mouths. You're pretty sure that's still a rule on this ship, though you suspect a few slip through anyway. There's debate among maritime historians about how democratic life at sea really was. Some say crews had more say than we assume, voting on routes or captains in extreme cases. Others argue hierarchy ruled with an iron fist and disobedience was punished swiftly and publicly. From where you're standing, somewhere near the middle of a chain of command held together by splinters and ego, you'd say the truth is both. You're expected to obey, but you're also expected to think, and sometimes to speak up, carefully. By late afternoon, the captain emerges on the deck. He inspects the sails, listens to a whispered report from the first mate, and walks a slow circle around the ship's edge, saying nothing. The crew straightens unconsciously as he passes. It's not fear, not exactly. It's more like gravity. When he's gone, work resumes. You fall back into your tasks, your place in the silent social order, knowing exactly where you stand and how far you have to go before anyone stops calling you green. But today the bosun doesn't yell at you once, and when you pass the carpenter's bench, Ansel nods without looking up. You take it as a promotion. It's sometime around nightfall, or maybe midnight, or maybe halfway to dawn. You've given up trying to tell. The stars blur together, and the moon only shows itself when it feels like being useful. What you know is this: it's your turn again. Not because your body is ready, or because the last shift ended gracefully, but because the bell rang and the bosun's voice cracked through the hold like a whip through fog. Time for your watch. No one else is moving, so you get up. The concept of watch sounded simple enough when you first heard it. You take turns, everyone works a little, everyone rests a little. Easies? Right. Wrong. The watch schedule on a medieval ship is a madness of bells, rotations and grumbling. The day is carved into chunks, usually 4-hour shifts depending on the captain's preference and the ship's traditions. That means you're either on duty, asleep, pretending to sleep, or being woken up for duty just as your dreams finally stopped being about falling off the mast. There are 2 main watches, the day watch and the night watch, but within those you've got first watch, middle watch, morning watch, and the hated dog watches, split 2-hour periods designed specifically to rotate the schedule so no one gets the same shift 2 nights in a row. Supposedly it keeps things fair. In reality it turns your internal clock into a broken sundial. Tonight it's middle watch, midnight to 4 a.m, and your body is not happy about it. You crawl from your damp pile of hay, stretch your stiff limbs, and smack your head on the same beam for the 5th time this week. That beam knows your name now. You mutter curses that don't even make sense. Your breath puffs in the cold air, visible and bitter. The world smells like wet wool and human fatigue. Above deck, the wind has changed. It has a bite now, sharp and high-pitched, whistling through the rigging like a warning. The sky is moonless, and the ship groans with every wave, the wooden hull flexing like it's trying to remember how to be a tree. You pull your cloak tighter and trudge to your post near the bow, hands shoved into your sleeves. The ocean at night is a different beast. During the day it's loud, constant and infuriating. At night it becomes something else, wide, black and watching. The stars reflect off the rolling water, making it look like the sky fell in. The ship feels tiny, insignificant, you even more so. Your job during watch varies. Sometimes it's manning the tiller, sometimes it's lookout duty. Tonight it's lantern patrol, checking that the lamps are lit, the ropes are secure, and nothing has caught fire. It's boring. It's cold. It's also important. One loose rope can become a death sentence. One unlit lantern, and someone stumbles into the sea. You begin your circuit. At the stern, the helmsman stands with one hand on the tiller, staring ahead like a statue carved from boredom. You nod. He nods back. No words exchanged. None needed. Your boots slap wet wood with each step. You tighten a knot here, adjust a lamp there. Whisper an insult at a pulley that keeps jamming. The darkness answers with silence and creaks. Here's your historical fact for the night. Watch rotations aboard medieval ships were an early form of 24-hour labour scheduling. Though not standardised until later centuries, the concept of the watch bell was already in use by the 13th century, with sandglasses or water clocks used to keep track of shifts. And yes, someone's actual job was to turn the hourglass and ring the bell. You've met that guy. He looks like he hasn't slept since last year. The quirky part? Some ships allowed stand-ins for watch, essentially paying or bribing a fellow sailor to take your shift. It wasn't technically allowed, but enforcement was spotty. One record from a merchant ship describes a man who bartered his night watch duties in exchange for a blanket and half an onion. Big trades at sea, and of course the scholarly debate. Were watch rotations effective or just tolerated? Some argue they created predictable fatigue cycles that made accidents more likely, especially in storms or emergencies. Others say they allowed enough flexibility for crews to rest, plan, and pace themselves, at least better than going without any structure at all. But from your position, shivering through hour 3 of middle watch, it feels less like structure and more like shared misery. You pass the mast and stop for a moment, watching it sway against the sky. The sail flaps softly, slack in the current wind. Everything's calm, too calm. You find your mind drifting to land, to warmth, to what sleep used to feel like. Not the kind of sleep you scrape together on a floorboard, but real sleep. A bed, a blanket that doesn't smell like salt and feet. The thought doesn't last long. A shout goes up from the lookout. "Light on the water!" Everyone stiffens. It could be another ship, could be wreckage, could be a trick of the moonlight. The captain appears within moments, fully dressed, as if he never sleeps. He barks a short command and suddenly the watch feels less like a chore and more like a countdown. The lookout points again. "There, starboard!" You squint, eyes straining against the dark. A flicker, then nothing. Then again, low and faint. Everyone holds their breath, false alarm, just a patch of bioluminescent plankton catching the light. They bloom in warm waters, especially around disturbed seas. Glowing with movement, you exhale. The captain nods once and disappears as fast as he came. You continue your round, a little faster now, just in case. Lanterns trimmed, ropes checked. The sea keeps its secrets, but you try not to add any new ones. Eventually the bell rings again. Watch change. Relief washes over you like a cold slap. You hand off your duties, nod to the next unlucky soul and drag yourself below deck. Limbs stiff and hollow. You collapse into your hay, not caring that it's damp or that someone's snoring into your ear. You're asleep before your eyes fully close, and in 4 hours it starts all over again. The day starts with a hush that feels like a threat. No shouting, no banging, no argument over biscuit portions, just the low, unsettling groan of the hull, and the wind whispering strange things through the rigging. You sit up slowly, hay clinging to your clothes like you've slept in a barn, which you basically have, and you notice something is off. The light filtering through the hatch above isn't the warm, dusty gold of sunrise. It's blue, cold blue, grey blue, storm blue. The moment you set foot on deck, you feel it in your chest. The sky has changed its mood entirely. Heavy clouds huddle above in a ceiling so low it could crush the mast. The sea is darker than usual. Less wine dark, more coal dark. The wind comes in bursts now as if testing the ship's patience. And there's a silence across the crew that you don't hear often. Not sleepy, not lazy, but bracing. Everyone's doing their job, but a little faster, a little sharper, as if they're all trying to get ahead of something they can't stop. Storm's coming. You weren't officially told. The captain hasn't made any announcements. But no one has to say it. You can see it in their eyes. You can smell it in the air. That sharp, wet bite of pressure collapsing inward. Even the rats are moving differently. Darting back and forth with purpose, like they know what's coming and want nothing to do with it. You're handed a rope, no explanation, and pointed toward the stern. You help lash down the barrels that weren't secured last night. Then you're ordered to help reef the sail, pull it in and bind it down before the wind decides it wants to tear it off. Your hands burn against the rope, salt grinding into the raw patches from the last shift. The sail jerks above you like it's alive and furious. You pull anyway. Within the hour, the first gust hits hard enough to knock 3 men off their feet. You stagger, catch yourself on a beam, and look up just in time to see the sky open. Not rain, not yet, just wind slicing in sideways, turning the sea into chaos. The waves swell deep and rolling like giants waking from a bad dream. The ship bucks under your feet. The deck tilts, then rights itself, but not before sending a barrel crashing into the port rail. The shouting begins. Orders, counter-orders, swearing. You join a group tying down the longboat. The rope slips, the boat lurches, someone screams, "It's you, probably you." A wave crashes over the side and soaks the lot of you in one frigid slap. There's no pause, no moment to regroup. The storm decides it's ready, and it doesn't wait for anyone. The rain comes in sideways sheets. You can't tell where the sea ends and the sky begins. Visibility drops to near nothing. The sails are half lowered, straining under the wind. The mast moans like it's begging for mercy. The helm resists every pull. The tiller jerks violently, held steady by two men with arms like tree trunks and expressions like funerals. The ship isn't sailing anymore. It's surviving. Historically, storms at sea were the ultimate equalizer. It didn't matter if you were the captain or the cook or just another unfortunate pressed into service. When the weather turned, the sea didn't care about your title. Medieval ships, especially cogs like this one, weren't exactly designed for elegance. They were built to float, not to dance. And in a storm, they floated with all the grace of a barrel being kicked down a hill. You cling to the rigging half for stability, half because your legs have stopped listening to you. Another wave crashes over the deck, taking a crate with it. Someone shouts a name, no one responds. You blink salt from your eyes and help haul a line that's whipping around like a snake in a tantrum. Here's your weird fringe fact. Some sailors believe that whistling during a storm made the wind worse. They said it called the devil's breath. One man years ago was tossed overboard just for humming a tune too cheerfully as the sky darkened. Out here, superstition is another survival tool. There's no clear debate among historians about just how survivable storms were for medieval sailors. Records are murky. Some voyages ended with a full return and nothing worse than bruises. Others vanished entirely, their fates pieced together only from scattered wreckage and weeping widows. What is known is that once a storm had you in its teeth, the odds weren't great. You didn't steer through it so much as hope it got bored and let you go. You're now doing the one thing no one ever wants to be doing. Bailing water. A makeshift bucket brigade has formed near the midship, and you're elbow deep in icy seawater that's sloshing where it absolutely shouldn't be. The ship groans with each wave. The floor under your boots tilts in slow, nauseating arcs. Every movement feels like defiance. A younger sailor beside you starts to cry, quietly, just a few hiccuping sobs, almost swallowed by the wind. You don't say anything, you keep bailing. Then the worst moment comes, not a wave, not a scream, but the loud crack of something giving way. The ship jerks, the mast creaks, there's a pause, everyone hears it. And then the captain's voice cuts through. "Hold fast!" You do. You don't know what's breaking. Maybe the rudder, maybe the mainsail, maybe the ship's spine, but you grip the nearest rope like it's tethered to your afterlife and you hold. The storm howls louder. And then, just as suddenly as it came, the storm starts to pass. It's not over. Not yet. But it eases. The wind dies down from scream to growl. The rain softens. The waves fall from monstrous to merely miserable. The crew exhales together, ragged and uneven. Someone collapses onto the deck. Someone else vomits into a bucket and laughs afterward. You sit, soaked and shaking, not sure if your hot legs will ever forgive you. Eventually the captain reappears, soaked to the bone, calm as stone. He nods once, and the crew begins to move again. Slower now, more carefully, like survivors picking through wreckage. The storm took something. It always does, but this time not the ship. You wring water from your sleeves and watch the horizon, still dark, still dangerous, but no longer snarling. You've seen the sea in a rage now, and somehow you're still here. The sea is calm now, deceptively so. Not flat, not glassy, but slow and rhythmic, like a sleeping creature that could roll over and crush you without realizing it. The storm is behind you, somewhere on the edge of memory and the horizon, and yet somehow your body still feels it. Everything aches. Your arms hum with soreness, your knees creak with every step, and your back is one single uninterrupted complaint. You didn't just survive the storm, you earned every bruise of it. But that's not what hits you hardest this morning. It's the smell. You've never quite noticed it before. Oh, sure. The ship has always stunk. That much is a given. But after a full night of storm-soaked chaos, something has changed. It's riper now, like the whole crew has been left out in the sun and forgotten. Your clothes are still wet, your skin is sticky, and the bedding, if you can still call it that, is officially a health hazard. Below deck, the air is thick and warm, not from sunlight, but from the shared breath of 40 exhausted, unwashed humans and one damp chicken. And then, right on cue, your stomach clenches. It starts slow, a rolling tightness, and then builds, sharp and sudden, until you're rushing topside with a hand over your mouth and that unmistakable feeling of betrayal bubbling in your throat. You make it to the rail just in time. Your body rejects everything, twice. Welcome to seasickness, the great equalizer. You thought you were past this. You've been at sea long enough, eaten enough bad biscuits, endured enough waves to earn your sea legs. But the storm threw everything off. Your body has lost its rhythm. Now it's like a child throwing a tantrum at every new motion of the ship. You spit, groan, and wipe your mouth on your sleeve. Behind you, someone claps slowly. A sarcastic little applause. You don't turn around. Seasickness doesn't care who you are. Veteran sailors, first-timers, nobles, peasants. It hits everyone eventually. You've seen the toughest man on board, the one with scars and muscles carved from years at sea, leaning over the side, heaving with tears in his eyes. You've also seen the ship's chicken vomit, which raises more questions than answers. Historically, seasickness was such a common problem that medieval sailors barely treated it as an illness. It was just part of the job, like rope burns or rat bites. They didn't have remedies, not really. Some chewed ginger if they had it, others sucked on pebbles. You've tried both. You're pretty sure the pebbles worked better, if only because they distracted you from the urge to die. The strangest fringe belief? Some thought seasickness was a punishment, a moral failing, that if you were impure or unworthy, the sea would try to shake you off like a bad flea. There's an old story among Breton sailors about a woman who sailed with a merchant fleet and grew violently sick every day until she confessed to cheating a baker out of a loaf of bread 10 years earlier. When she admitted it, the vomiting stopped. Coincidence? Maybe, though no one wants to test it. There's a theory among scholars that seasickness isn't just physical, it's psychological. A trauma response almost. Your brain, thrown into chaos by motion, humidity and lack of control, just decides to melt down in the most dramatic way possible. Others argue it's purely biological, an inner ear problem mixed with your body's deeply reasonable refusal to accept that floors should move. You lean against the railing, still pale, trying to steady your breath. The sea rises and falls gently beneath the hull, but to your body, it's still betrayal in motion. You close your eyes and focus on your breathing. In, out, in, out. Then the smell of salt pork from the galley wafts up, and your stomach tightens like a fist. There's no escape. The smells, the motion, the heat, they find you. Below deck is worse, a pocket of humid misery. You stay topside, even though your limbs beg for rest, because at least here, the breeze offers a bit of mercy. Around you, other sailors suffer in their own ways. One man crouches near the mast, eyes closed, whispering to himself like he's bargaining with the sea gods. Another lies flat on the deck, arms spread, green as a cabbage leaf. The boatswain walks past without comment. There's nothing to say. It's not weakness, it's just part of the job. The captain, of course, is immune, or seems to be. He stands near the helm, unmoved, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the horizon like a man who eats storms for breakfast. Maybe he's faking it. Maybe he's just built differently. Either way, no one dares ask. You finally force yourself to sip some ale. It's warm as usual, but it helps coat your throat and settles your stomach just enough to allow motion. You walk slowly across the deck, avoiding the worst puddles and stains. A fellow sailor nods at you, sympathetic. You both look like ghosts. Work must go on. The storm left everything tangled, soaked and bruised. Ropes need untangling, sails need drying, barrels need checking. Your body protests, but you move anyway. Slow, careful, mechanical, and somehow slowly the sickness begins to fade. Your stomach stops flipping. The nausea dulls to a vague queasiness. The colour starts to return to your vision. You're not well, but you're no longer actively revolting. You pause beside the chicken coop, yes, still there, still occupied, and Gertie, the ship's only surviving hen, eyes you curiously. She cocks her head, then lets out a soft cluck. You nod back. She gets hot. By sundown, your appetite even starts to come back. A little, you nibble at the edge of a biscuit. You sip the broth. It stays down, barely. It's a win. You find a spot on deck and sit against the side of the ship, staring out into the blue. The waves are gentler now, almost kind. You watch them roll and break and roll again, as if the storm never happened, as if the sea never tried to kill you. It's peaceful, infuriatingly so. You close your eyes for a moment, just long enough to feel the wind on your face, the sun's last light on your cheeks. You're still here, still sore, still salt-stained, but not seasick, not anymore, for now. It starts with silence, that uncanny, weighty kind of silence, the kind that seems to press on your ears, like the world's holding its breath. The sea is calm, too calm. No wind, no waves, just stillness. The sails hang slack and useless, limp as laundry in the dead of night. The crew moves quietly, voices lowered, eyes flicking to the horizon more than usual. That's when the bell tolls, not the watch bell, not the meal bell. The other one, the one reserved for the worst kind of news. You freeze mid-step. Every sailor on deck turns. No one speaks. The boatswain's face tightens as he marches to the stern castle. The cook stops stirring his pot. Even Gertie the chicken falls silent. Then comes the second toll. A few crew members begin to gather. Slowly, hesitantly. You follow. You don't want to, but your feet carry you forward anyway. As if they already know what this is, as if they've seen it before in another life. There, lying on a tarp near the mast, is the body. You don't recognise the man right away. He's pale, lips blue, eyes closed, arms folded awkwardly over his chest. One of the older sailors, quiet, always stayed near the aft. You think his name was Tom or maybe Jory. You'd spoken only once. He'd passed you a mug of ale on your second day. You hadn't said thank you. Now he's dead. The captain appears, followed closely by the first mate and the carpenter. No grand speech, no sermon, just a nod. Prepare him, the captain says. The crew gets to work. You're given a cloth and told to help. There's no priest aboard, no scripture, just ritual. The man's body is wrapped in linen, white, stained from use, with crude stitching down the centre. His arms are positioned properly now. His boots removed. One coin placed on each eye. Not for the ferrymen, just to keep them shut. They sew the tarp around him, every stitch slow, careful, like it matters more than anything else in the world. The boatswain mutters under his breath as he ties the final knot. A prayer, maybe, or a curse, hard to tell with him. There's no coffin, there never is. Wood is for the living, for building, for burning, not for burying. A plank is laid over the side of the ship. The body is placed on it, head toward the sea. The crew gathers silently, hats in hand. You find yourself clutching your own, surprised at how tightly your fingers hold. The captain steps forward. He served. He sailed. He slept his last, he says. 3 simple lines. That's it. The crew murmurs something, too quiet to hear. Then, with one slow tilt of the plank, the body slips into the sea. There's a splash. And then, nothing. No one moves right away. The water closes over him like it never cared, like it doesn't remember. You stand there still, watching the spot where he vanished. The coin flash is gone, the white of the cloth gone. He's part of the ocean now, absorbed, forgotten. Except not by you. This is your first burial at sea, the crew's third this voyage. Death happens quietly out here. Doesn't ask permission, no ceremony, no family. Just cold water and a fast goodbye. The silence that follows is heavier than the ceremony itself. No one cries, no one talks about it. Everyone just returns to work as if they hadn't just watched a man vanish into the deep. You do too, because what else can you do? The death brings new tension. Everyone becomes just a little more careful. Steps are watched, ropes checked twice, meals eaten slower, superstitions multiply, no one whistles anymore. A piece of cloth is tied to the mast, red and frayed to ward off bad air. Here's your historical fact. Burials at sea were a grim necessity on long voyages, especially in medieval times when refrigeration wasn't a thing and storage was tight. If someone died, they were sewn into sailcloth, given a prayer if the crew felt like it, and then sent overboard, usually within hours. Delaying meant disease, smell, panic. The odd detail? The last stitch was always sewn through the nose, not out of cruelty, out of certainty. If the man flinched, groaned, or bled, well, he wasn't dead after all. Not the kind of surprise anyone wanted in a closed, dark ship hold. You didn't ask about Tom or Jory, you just hoped the last stitch was clean. There's ongoing scholarly debate over how often sailors were buried at sea versus preserved and returned home. In most merchant or military voyages, especially far from land, burial at sea was standard. Bodies weren't brought back unless the person was someone important, an officer, a noble, or someone whose death might affect a contract. For the rest, the sea claimed them. As you return to your chores, your mind drifts. You wonder how many lie beneath the ship now, how many old sailors rest in these waters. In shallow graves made of sailcloth and salt. It's comforting in a strange way, like the ocean has company. Later that night you pass by the empty spot where Tom or maybe Jory used to sit. There's a dent in the wood where he used to lean. A small scrape from where he dropped his knife once. The kind of details no one else notices. But you do. That night, sleep doesn't come easily. You lie awake, rocking gently with the ship and think about the last breath he took. What he was thinking. Whether he knew, whether he was afraid. You promise yourself something. If it happens to you, if the sea takes you, you'll go down with your boots on. You'll face it, not because you're brave, but because you've seen what it looks like when you don't. In the early morning hours, you wake from a dream of sinking. Cold, silent, peaceful. You go topside to breathe. And there, far out on the horizon, something moves beneath the surface, just for a moment. You tell yourself it was nothing. By now, you've accepted that your body is no longer your own. It belongs to the ship, or the sea, or possibly the rats, depending on who gets there first. But the part that truly breaks your spirit, what finally tips the scale from discomfort into absurd misery, is the undeniable, unstoppable, unholy truth that no matter what you do, you are never ever going to feel clean again. The stink doesn't just cling to you, it becomes you. It seeps into your skin like brine into pork, and no amount of scrubbing, rinsing, or wishful thinking is going to change that. Your clothes are stiff with salt. Your scalp itches constantly, a mix of sweat, grime, and some microscopic horror probably living in your hair. Your fingernails are blackened, your boots are growing a new civilization, and your armpits have developed their own climate system. You think back, vaguely, to a time when you used to care. A hot bath, a clean shirt, maybe some scented soap if you were feeling fancy. That's a different life now. Out here, washing is aspirational, the kind of thing you joke about, like getting paid or eating a plum. There is water everywhere, of course, just not the kind that helps. Salt water doesn't clean, it scours. It dries your skin to parchment and stings every cut, blister, or regret you've accumulated. The one time you dared to wash your face with seawater, your skin cracked around your mouth and your lips went white for 3 days. One sailor tried a full saltwater rinse. He came back looking like he'd lost a fight with a cheese grater. There's only one fresh water barrel reserved for limited washing purposes, and by washing, what they mean is 2 ladlefuls once a week, if the weather holds and you haven't made the cook angry. You stand in line like it's a holy sacrament, strip to your ragged undershirt, and use a grimy cloth to dab the worst parts of yourself, neck, underarms, maybe behind the ears if you're feeling luxurious. No soap, just the cold splash of barely clean water and the gentle jeering of whoever's behind you in line. And don't even ask about laundry. Your shirt? Never been washed. Your trousers? They've got enough salt baked into them to start a trade route. If you want to get the stink out, you throw your clothes over the side on a rope and drag them in the sea for half an hour. Then you wear them wet. Always wet. Always chafing. The captain, of course, has better arrangements. He gets a personal bowl and a private corner for rinsing, and rumour has it he owns more than one pair of socks. Must be nice. The carpenter, too, has a secret stash of rosewater. Not enough to bathe in, just enough to dab behind his ears now and then. He claims it's medicinal. You suspect vanity. Here's your historical nugget for the night. Medieval sailors didn't bathe. Not in the modern sense. Cleanliness wasn't just impractical, it was seen by many as suspicious. There was even a belief among certain shipboard cultures that excessive washing made the body vulnerable to cold, illness, or demonic possession. Filth, bizarrely, was protection. Your filth was your armour, a layer between you and whatever disease was coming next. And the fringe detail? Some sailors wore garlic cloves in their clothes, or tucked them into their boots, not just for the smell, but to purify the air. One man on your crew wears a sprig of dried lavender sewn into his cap. It does nothing, but he swears it keeps the lice away. He is wrong. Which brings us to them, the lice. They are your constant companions now. You feel them at night, crawling along your scalp, behind your ears, down your back, you scratch until your skin is raw, and then you scratch some more. Every sailor has them. No one bothers to pretend otherwise. Once a week, the crew holds what they call a nit hunt. Everyone strips down to the waist and starts picking at themselves and each other like monkeys in a plague zoo. They gather the results in a little tin bowl and toss it overboard ceremonially. It's disgusting, it's weirdly social. It's also the most bonding you've done with the crew. There's a saying on the ship, if you're not scratching, you're dead. Some sailors cut their hair off entirely to fight the lice. Others just wear headscarves soaked in vinegar, though it's hard to say if that's effective or just another superstition. You've considered burning your hat more than once, but then you'd have nothing to shield you from the sun, which is now peeling your nose in layers like an onion. A historian once wrote that medieval ships were floating petri dishes, and you're now fully on board with that description. The stench of old food, rat droppings, human sweat, damp wood, and bilge water creates a unique perfume that clings to your nostrils long after you've left the lower decks. You smell it even in your dreams. There's ongoing debate among scholars about whether medieval sailors noticed how bad it was. Some argue that people in those times simply had a different tolerance for filth, that if everyone smelled like barnyard stew, no one complained. Others believe sailors did notice and simply endured it, grumbling about it with the same resigned tone they use for weevils and cracked biscuits. Based on what you've seen, it's the latter. Everyone knows they stink. They just don't have time to care. One day, a passing ship pulls alongside briefly. Trading maybe, on the sea. The crew on the other vessel takes one whiff of your ship and recoils in visible horror. One man gags, another yells something about rotting pigs. The bosun flips them a gesture that requires no translation. You all laugh, not because it's funny, but because if you don't, you might cry. You reach a point where you stop noticing. Your nose adapts, your standards collapse. You've entered what the crew calls the filth plateau. You're not clean, you never will be, but you've accepted it. Still, sometimes, late at night, you dream of water, of rivers, of hot baths, of someone pouring warm water over your head, while soft hands scrub your back and the scent of lavender fills the air. Then you wake up, soaked in sweat, scratching your scalp with a splintered fingernail, and roll over into someone else's foot. And it's just another day. Boredom hits like a slow-moving disease. Not all at once, but in waves. Silent, heavy, and impossible to shake. It creeps into your bones, turns your muscles slack, your thoughts thick and slow. The storm's past, the sickness faded. The ship repairs are mostly done, and now there's nothing. Nothing but the endless sea stretching to the horizon in every direction, and a slow crawl of time that feels like it's being measured in centuries. You know you're technically moving, but it doesn't feel like it. The sails are full, the ship cuts along just fine, but your brain? Stuck in molasses. You've been on board long enough to get used to the work, the hunger, the smell, the sleep deprivation. But no one warned you about the boredom. And it's not the gentle kind, it's the maddening, itch-in-the-mind kind that makes you stare at a knot for 45 minutes and consider untying it just to feel something. At first, you try to stay busy. Cleaning, scrubbing, reorganising ropes, even counting rat sightings, which, for the record, currently stands at 23, though you're pretty sure 2 of those were the same rat in a different hat. But eventually there's just no more left to do. The ship is tiny. The ocean is big, the sky is too big. And the human brain was simply not designed to spend this much time with nothing to do but survive. You ask someone, "What do you do when it's quiet like this?" He shrugs. Wait for it not to be. That's when you start to notice what the rest of the crew does to fill the void. They've all got tricks, little rituals, secret games to keep the edge of madness at bay. Dice games are the most common. Crude ones, carved from bone or smoothed bits of wood, passed from hand to hand like sacred relics. No currency is exchanged, there's nothing to gamble with, but pride. Pride is worth a lot when your daily wins involve not vomiting or falling overboard. They play in tight circles near the forecastle, grumbling, laughing, and occasionally accusing each other of cheating, which somehow always ends in a handshake. A slap on the back and a muttered insult about someone's mother. Then there are the stories. Late at night, when the stars are out and the watch is dull, someone inevitably starts talking. And oh, the lies these men tell. One claims he saw a sea serpent as long as the ship, with eyes that glowed like lanterns. Another says he sailed with a pirate queen who wore gold rings on every finger and kept her husband locked in a barrel. A third insists the moon is hollow and filled with angels who curse sailors for spitting overboard. You hear stories of sea monsters, ghost ships, cursed ports, fish that scream like children, and islands made entirely of birds. No one believes them, not fully, but no one calls them out either. Truth isn't the point, distraction is. Here's your historical fact of the night. Sailors in the medieval period relied heavily on oral storytelling and games to pass the time. Literacy was rare among crewmen, and books, precious, expensive things, weren't exactly practical cargo on ships prone to damp and fire. Entertainment came from memory, tradition, and imagination. The darker the tale, the better. A little terror helped pass the time faster. Now for your quirky detail. One fringe game you witness involves capturing rats and racing them. Yes, actual rat races. The sailors draw little lanes on the deck with chalk, place bets on which rat will reach the bucket of barley first, and then spend an alarming amount of time cheering and jeering like they're watching knights joust. You don't participate, but you do find yourself rooting for a particularly fast one named Scrimshaw. He wins twice. The crew builds him a tiny crown. Another sailor makes music. Not good music, mind you, but music. He's got a busted old flute carved from driftwood, and he plays it in weird, wheezy bursts that sound like someone trying to charm a dying snake, but the crew doesn't care. The sound, ugly though it is, breaks the silence. Some even hum along, off-key and half asleep. It becomes a ritual. Bad flute, worse singing, better mood. And then there are the shanties. Sea shanties aren't just songs, they're rhythm, instruction, and morale all wrapped into one. Sung during hard labour, they help keep time when hauling lines or rowing, or hauling something heavy that might break your spine. But when the work is light, the shanties become something else, an echo of the world beyond the waves. Songs of taverns, women, storms home. Some are funny, some are sad, some don't even have real words anymore. Just syllables passed down like old soup recipes. You hum one under your breath for days without realising it. There's scholarly debate about when and where true shanties originated. Some argue they didn't become formal until the 17th century, but the roots of them, the communal call and response rhythm of sailors working together, go back much further. Maybe not all were songs in the way we think of them now. Some were just chants, grunts, syllables to keep the hands moving, and the mind from wandering too far. One quiet evening, someone tells a ghost story. It starts simple. A sailor who saw lights on the water that weren't stars. But then the details grow. A ship with no sails, drifting at night. A crew made of shadows, a whisper that follows you below deck. You laugh at first, then the wind shifts, and the rigging creaks just the wrong way, and suddenly your candle flickers for no reason at all. You don't laugh after that. That night, everyone sleeps a little closer together, just in case. As the days drag on, the crew starts assigning nicknames. You're dubbed Nod, for how often you fall asleep while standing. There's Three Tooth, Stinky Rob, Butterhands, and Crabjaw. No one explains that last one. You never are. Gertie the chicken now has a whole legend surrounding her, complete with a prophecy that she'll lay a golden egg if the voyage lasts more than 30 days. Spoiler, she won't. The boredom never really goes away. It just changes shape. Some days it looks like a slow crawl of clouds across the sky. Some days it sounds like a song hummed out of tune for the 100th time. Some days it smells like salt pork again. But you make it through each one dice roll, one rat race, one ghost story at a time. And that's something. You're on deck minding your business, well, pretending to, because at this point you'd trade your soul for a distraction when the lookout shouts. Just one word, sail. It slices through the quiet like a blade. Everyone freezes. Then chaos. The captain emerges from below in record time. The first mate's already halfway up the rigging with a spyglass. The boatswain barks orders. You and the rest of the crew rush to the starboard side like you've been trained for this moment, which of course you haven't. You peer out at the horizon, eyes squinting against the glare, and there it is. A shape. Too small to see clearly, but definitely a ship, and definitely getting closer. Your stomach drops. Could be a merchant ship, could be friendly, could be nothing, could also be pirates. The crew starts moving faster, less out of efficiency and more out of pure sweaty panic. Weapons are pulled from places you didn't know weapons were stored. Clubs, daggers, boarding hooks, even a rusted crossbow that looks like it's fired exactly once, possibly by accident. The carpenter arms himself with a hammer and a wild look. The cook pulls out a cleaver and mutters to himself, "You?" You're handed a belaying pin and told to look angry. There's no cannon. This is a cog, not a warship. You have no armour, no guns. The best defence this ship has is her high sides, her speed mediocre, and the fact that you look like you have absolutely nothing worth stealing. Which, if we're being honest, is mostly true, but pirates don't always care about cargo. The first mate climbs down and whispers to the captain. You can't hear the words, but the captain's face hardens. Whatever he saw through that spyglass wasn't good. The order goes out, tighten the rigging, angle the sail, increase speed. You start moving faster than you thought the ship could manage. The wind's just strong enough to catch, and the ship groans as it leans into the turn. You glance back at the horizon. The shape is still there. Closer now. Here's your historical reality check. Piracy in the medieval era was not the romantic swashbuckling fantasy you see in stories. No parrots, no buried treasure. Just desperate men on desperate ships preying on whoever was slower, weaker, or unlucky. In the North Sea, in the Channel, in the Mediterranean, it didn't matter. If you had a sail, you were a target. Pirates weren't always lawless outcasts either. Sometimes they were just regular sailors between jobs. Sometimes they were backed quietly by governments looking to disrupt enemy trade. Letters of marque, licenses to plunder, were common later on. But even in the medieval period, many pirate crews operated with a sort of unofficial political blessing. Raiding your enemy's goods? Not piracy, that's patriotism. The crew starts prepping the ship. Not for battle exactly, this isn't that kind of ship, but for a boarding. The valuables, what few there are quickly hidden below deck, buried under sacks of grain or stuffed into the bilge. One man pockets a ring and ties it under his shirt. Someone else starts crying softly. The captain remains quiet, focused, calculating. Eventually, the ship on the horizon gets close enough to see its sail. Black, but not fully. A dark sail with a strange symbol in the centre. Not one you recognise, not the mark of a known trader. That's not a good sign. You finally ask, voice low, what do we do if they board? The man beside you, a grizzled veteran with a face like cured leather, doesn't look at you. He just says, give them nothing, show no fear. If they think we're sick or cursed, they might pass. Great. You do your best to look ill and haunted, which honestly isn't hard. You haven't bathed in weeks and you've been scratching your head for days like it owes you money. Add a little wide-eyed trembling and you're basically a walking bad omen. And here's your fringe detail of the night. Some sailors believe smearing animal blood on the deck would ward off pirates. Supposedly it made them think the ship had already been attacked, or that disease had taken the crew. One man tries it now, sacrificing one of the chickens, not Gertie, a less lucky one. The blood drips across the deck as the wind picks up, and suddenly your ship feels less like a trading vessel and more like something out of a fever dream. The pirate ship, if that's what it is, keeps approaching. Close enough now that you can see figures on the deck, shapes moving, watching. It's still too far for a bow shot, but not for long. Then, just as the tension is about to break, something happens. The other ship slows. Its sail shifts direction, subtly, but definitely. And the angle of its approach changes. Not a full retreat, but not a direct course either. The captain notices instantly. The crew watches in silence. No one breathes. Then by degrees, the ship peels away. It doesn't stop, doesn't signal, doesn't speak, just veers off. You exhale like you've been holding it for a week. No one cheers, no one claps, there's no victory. Just survival. Someone mutters, they didn't like the look of us. Another says, maybe they're saving us for later. You choose not to think about that. The captain orders the sail adjusted again. Course maintained. The threat passes. The rest of the day is spent in cautious silence. No stories, no jokes. Everyone's watching the horizon now, just in case. There's scholarly debate over how often pirate attacks actually occurred during the medieval era. Some argue they were rare and exaggerated. Others say they were constant but under-recorded, especially in unofficial trade routes. Based on today's events, you believe it was probably a bit of both. Not every sail is danger, but enough are to keep your heart in your throat. That night you lie awake, staring up at the stars, trying to forget the look of that other ship. Its black sail, its silent passing. And you wonder, not for the first time, if next time you'll be so lucky. The harbour creeps into view like a mirage. First a speck, then a smudge, then a recognisable tangle of masts, rooftops, and promise, land. After weeks of swaying decks, endless horizon, and the kind of stink that clings to your soul, land has become a fantasy. something distant and suspicious. Like a story drunk men tell in taverns, but it's real, and it's close enough now that you can smell it. And that smell is glorious. Not good, exactly, more like different. Soil, wood smoke, fish markets, rotting fruit, the tang of too many animals packed into too little space, but your nose doesn't care. Anything that isn't salt, sweat, or human suffering smells like a feast. The closer the ship gets, the louder the noises from the port grow. You hear shouting, hooves, bells, laughter. Laughter! It sounds fake at first, like a bird imitating a human. But no, that's a real laugh, from a real person, on real land. The ship doesn't dock right away. It circles awkwardly, waiting for clearance from the harbour master, who waves a tattered flag from a post that looks like it was nailed together during a storm. Eventually, ropes are tossed, lines are secured, the gangplank is lowered, and just like that, you're allowed to step off the floating coffin and into the world. Well, almost. First, there's protocol. Port stops are brief and tightly controlled. You've been warned. If you're not back by dusk, the ship leaves without you. If you cause trouble, the crew pretends not to know you. If you get arrested, you're on your own. One man from a previous voyage once left the ship, married a brewer's daughter, and never returned. Another went ashore, got pickpocketed, and spent the rest of the trip as the ship's unpaid jester. You plan to fall somewhere in between. You get 1 coin and half a day, and it's already burning a hole in your hand. As soon as your boots hit the cobbles, you realise 2 things. 1, your legs hate you. You haven't walked on solid ground in so long that your knees don't trust it. Every step feels like a lie. 2, you stink. You knew this already, in the theory. But now, in the fresh chaos of a port town filled with people who haven't been stewing in their own sweat for weeks, you smell like a walking cautionary tale. But no one pays much attention. Port towns are used to the shipborne. Everyone here either came off a vessel or wishes they could afford to. It's a place of transition, trade and treachery, full of drunks, pickpockets, merchants, guards, and a truly terrifying number of goats. The crew scatters almost immediately, each sailor peeling off toward whatever shore-based advice they've been dreaming of for weeks. Ale, meat, a real bed, maybe something a little more intimate if they've saved their coin. You follow them loosely, pulled by scent and sound until you find the nearest tavern that doesn't look like it'll collapse if you lean on it too hard. It's dim, loud and sticky, but it's perfect. You squeeze through the crowd and order the cheapest thing available. A bowl of something meat-adjacent, a chunk of bread that doesn't break your teeth, and a mug of ale that hasn't been stored in a rotting barrel. The barkeep doesn't ask questions. He's seen worse. He probably smells worse. You sit, chew slowly and try not to cry. The bread is warm, the stew is seasoned, the ale is cold. You look around and see other sailors doing the same, faces slack with quiet euphoria, eyes glazed not from drink but from flavour. A man at the next table is licking his bowl, another is asleep in his food. No one minds. Historically, port stops during medieval voyages were rare and short but essential. Ships had to restock food, water and morale. The crew, often on the brink of mutiny or madness, needed a few hours of normalcy, even if normal included brawls, venereal disease and bad decisions. Some ports welcomed sailors, others viewed them like invasive species, necessary but unwanted. Either way, coin talked. And you were coin with legs. The weird fringe detail? Some port towns banned sailors from entering in groups larger than 3. Too much risk of sudden rioting. One particularly anxious port required sailors to wear bells on their boots like cats to prevent surprise thefts. There are no bells on you today, but the guards at the gate did give you a long look, as if calculating how many tavern chairs you might break before they have to chase you. You finish your meal and make your way down the main street, half expecting something bad to happen. No one robs you, no one vomits on your shoes, you pass a small stand selling dried fruit and a child waves at you. You blink, you wave back, you forgot people under 10 existed. You buy a single fig with your last sliver of coin. Just one. It tastes like a miracle. Then you hear the bell. Not from the tavern, from the harbour. The ship's bell, twice. That means 1 hour to departure. You turn, torn between the desire to vanish into this town forever, and the certainty that if you don't get back, you'll be stranded here with no money, no friends, and no way home. That, and you'll probably end up press-ganged onto some other ship. Maybe worse. You jog back to the dock, fig juice still on your lips, heart heavy. Most of the crew is already there, slightly drunk, slightly injured, and absolutely none of them looking better than they did before. The carpenter has a new limp. The cook has 2 mugs. The bosun has lipstick on his ear. Someone has a goat. No one asks questions. Back aboard, you stand near the rail and watch the port fade as the ship pulls away. The buildings shrink. The sound dims. The smell, sweet and earthy and warm, fades into the salt stink you now recognise as home. And still, part of you aches for it. That brief taste of land life, of laughter, spices, dirt roads, and wooden bowls filled with things that made your heart flutter. You didn't even notice how loud the sea had been until it was gone. You sigh and tighten the strap on your bag. Something shifts in your boot. The fig seed. You kept it. For no reason. Maybe just to remember. It happens the way most disasters happen on a ship. Without warning, without logic, and with everyone acting like it's completely normal. One moment you're standing on deck tightening a loose coil of rope, and the next, the entire crew is frozen, staring at you like you've committed a capital crime. You blink. What? Silence. Someone mutters, "Did he just say it?" More silence. You look around, confused. "Say what?" Another sailor takes a step back. A third makes the sign of the cross. A fourth whispers something about the cursed fruit. You glance at your hands. Empty. You check your pockets. Nothing. The bosun strides over, squinting. "Say it again," he growls. You hesitate. What part? I just said the wind's turned strange and that it smells a bit like bananas." Gasps. Actual audible gasps. A nearby sailor drops the barrel he was carrying. Another mutters, "He said it. He said the B word." The cook spits over the side and hisses, "We're doomed." You stare, dumbfounded. "Bananas? Bananas? You're telling me I can't say bananas?" The bosun leans in close, so close you can smell the anchovy breakfast on his breath. "You never say that word on a ship," he growls. "Never. Ever again." It's then that you are formally introduced to the absolutely insane world of sailor superstitions. Bananas, it turns out, are the tip of the iceberg. According to at least half the crew, bananas are cursed objects, harbingers of shipwreck, bad weather, and fishless voyages. One man claims that every ship he's ever seen with bananas aboard either caught fire, capsized, or was overtaken by ghost pirates. Another swears that bananas attract sharks. You're not even in banana country, you want to argue you really do, but then the rigging lets out a loud crack, perfectly normal shift in the ropes, and half the crew flinches like you summoned Satan himself. You decide to shut up. From that point on, the superstitions pour in like seawater through a bad hatch. The sailor next to you tells you that whistling on deck cools the wind, and not in a helpful way. The cook won't allow eggs cracked in odd numbers. The carpenter wears the same socks for every voyage, never washed, because they're lucky. There's a crew member who refuses to touch the mast with his left hand, and another who sleeps facing north no matter where the ship is headed. Women on board? Bad luck. Mentioning pigs? Worse. Mentioning rabbits? Unforgivable. One sailor heard you cough and demanded to know if your grandmother ever saw a hare on the day you were born. You tried to laugh. He didn't. You start to realise that for all their toughness, sailors are among the most superstitious people alive. It makes sense in a twisted way. When your life depends on wind, water, and a wooden box with questionable nails, you start looking for something to control. Even if that something is a sock, a coin, or the avoidance of a certain fruit. Here's your historical fact. Maritime superstitions date back centuries and were deeply rooted in nearly every seafaring culture. Medieval sailors, lacking weather forecasts, scientific understanding, or even consistent maps, filled in the gaps with rituals and beliefs. They feared changing winds, red skies, and birds flying low. Omens were everywhere, and if something bad happened, someone, anyone, was to blame. And the fringe fact? In some cultures, sailors would nail a piece of iron to the prow of the ship to ward off evil. Others carried dried seahorses in small pouches around their necks. There are reports of sailors refusing to board a vessel if its name contained certain letters. You glance at the name of your ship. It has 2 of those letters. You don't bring it up. Scholars still argue about how seriously sailors took these beliefs. Some think it was just tradition, something to joke about on calm days. Others suggest these rituals were deadly serious. Violations led to ostracization, violence, or worse. You're beginning to believe it. That night, someone quietly scrubs the word banana off the back of your tunic with seawater and muttered prayers. To make matters worse, Someone swears they saw a woman on board during the port stop, not a passenger, a stowaway. The ship practically vibrates with fear. One man refuses to go below deck. Another spends the entire night burning herbs in the cargo hold just in case. The captain says nothing. He doesn't deny it. He just says, "If she's here, she'll bring the sea with her." You sleep very badly that night. The next morning the wind dies completely. No breeze, no movement. The sail hangs slack. The sea turns glassy and still. Everyone looks at you. You look back. "No," you say. "It's not the banana thing." But no one listens. The cook serves cold stew for breakfast and refuses to make eye contact. The bosun doesn't speak to you all day. The carpenter glares at your boots like they've offended him personally. The crew starts whispering again. The boat sits still for 2 full days. No progress, no wind. And somehow your cabin now smells faintly like overripe fruit. Eventually the breeze returns, but the suspicion does not fade. For the rest of the voyage you are the one who said it. Your name is scratched off the dice list. Your bowl is always filled last. Gertie the chicken stops laying eggs, and guess who they blame? From then on you say nothing. No pigs. No rabbits, no bananas. You knock on wood when you pass the mast, you stop whistling. You start spitting over the side before bed. You don't believe the superstitions, but you also don't tempt the sea, not twice. You catch the scent before you even see him. A cloud of clove, resin, and something floral that doesn't belong anywhere near this much mildew. You turn your head, and there he is, the nobleman, sitting under the shaded edge of the stern castle like he's posing for a painting no one asked for, wearing a hat that would absolutely not survive one good gust of wind, and a velvet tunic that might have once been crimson, but is now a sort of brave brown. He's dabbing at his upper lip with a linen cloth soaked in rosewater and looking around like someone who just woke up in the wrong theatre performance. You've seen him before, of course, briefly, when he came aboard back at the last port. He and his 2 servants didn't speak to the crew, didn't carry their own trunks, and didn't so much as glance at the hold where the rest of you sleep like salted fish. Rumour says he's a diplomat, or a wealthy merchant, or someone's third cousin on an unnecessary pilgrimage. What's clear is that he paid extra for a cabin, an actual cabin, with a door, a stool, and 4 full square feet of space that doesn't smell like damp despair. You haven't thought much about him since then, until now. Now, he's suddenly emerged like a moth from a velvet cocoon, blinking at the daylight and trying not to breathe too deeply. The scent of cloves wafts over the deck in waves. You're not the only one who notices. The crew starts turning their heads, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed irritation. One sailor coughs dramatically as he walks by. Another mutters, "Smells like a funeral for oranges." The nobleman doesn't react. He's reading a letter, slowly, with that kind of deliberate frown that suggests either deep thought or a total lack of comprehension. One of his servants, a boy no older than 16, holds a parasol over him, shielding his pale face from the sun like it might melt. It's absurd, and it's also completely normal, because this is what the wealthy bring to sea, not just cargo, but their worlds. They travel with cushions, with brass buttons, with wooden boxes filled with spices and dry parchment and folded silk shirts. You once caught a glimpse into his cabin as the door swung open. You saw rugs, you saw a silver mirror, you saw dried lavender hanging in a pouch above the bunk. It looked like a tiny chapel had been stitched into the ship's spine. You, meanwhile, have 3 socks, 2 of which are the same colour. He doesn't speak to the crew, not directly. If he wants something, he tells his servant, who then tells the captain, who then tells the first mate, who then tells the bosun, who then grunts at you. It's a trickle-down system of pure inconvenience, and everyone resents it. But no one says a word because nobles bring coin, and coin keeps ships sailing. Here's your historical footnote. It wasn't uncommon for wealthy passengers to book space on merchant vessels during the medieval period, especially on longer voyages, pilgrimages, diplomatic missions, or trade expeditions, but they rarely travelled light. In fact, some brought entire kitchens, bedding, and private guards. The more money you had, the less you ever had to actually touch the ship. Now for the weird bit, some nobles were so terrified of sea travel that they brought personal priests to bless the waves each morning. One document even describes a count who insisted his cabin be lined with lead panels to shield against mermaid songs. Unsurprisingly, he didn't survive the voyage. He died of heatstroke halfway through. The ship's cook used one of the lead panels as a frying pan. Life goes on. The nobleman, as it turns out, is also terrified. Not of mermaids, but of dirt. He won't sit anywhere that hasn't been wiped down twice. He insists that his water be just short of boiling, and he wears gloves at all times, even when adjusting his hat. You've seen him scowl at the ship's railing like it personally insulted his lineage. One day you're ordered to carry a basket of fruit to his cabin. Real fruit. Apples and pears and dried apricots. You nearly cry. You knock softly and his servant opens the door just wide enough to pass it through. The air that escapes is unreal. Spiced. Warm. Somehow dry. You get one brief look at the nobleman himself, reclining on a cushion, sipping wine from a silver goblet. Like this is some kind of floating palace. You hate him a little. Not for being rich, not for being soft. You hate him because he smells like cinnamon, doesn't have lice. And yet you feel a weird flicker of pity. He's not happy. Not really. He's jumpy. He watches the crew with narrowed eyes. He doesn't smile, not even when his servant tells him a joke in a language you don't know. He doesn't laugh. He just nods and resumes staring at the wall. There's a debate among the crew about what would happen if pirates boarded the ship again. Would they ransom him? Would he throw gold at them? Would he faint? One sailor says the pirates wouldn't even bother. They'd just take the rugs and leave the man. Too much perfume, he says. Probably poison. But the most telling thing happens one morning. During a sudden squall, the wind howls, the rain lashes. The ship heaves in a way that makes your stomach try to escape. The crew is rushing to adjust sails and tie down cargo. Everyone is soaked, half-blind, yelling over the roar of the storm. The nobleman appears at the top of the stairs. Pale as the clouds, clutching the railing with shaking fingers. His fine cloak is soaked instantly. His velvet hat flies off into the sea. He just stands there, frozen. You catch his eye. And for one raw second, you're just two humans on a boat, equally terrified, equally soaked, equally useless against the sky. He opens his mouth, says nothing, turns and disappears below. After the storm, he doesn't reappear for days. You hear that his servant has been emptying the chamber pot more often. You hear that he requested a second blanket. You hear he started scratching his scalp. You smile. It's a small thing, but it helps. Because now you know the truth. Money might buy you cloves and dried figs. It might get you a cushion and a chamber pot that doesn't smell like crime. But it can't protect you from the sea. Not really. And the sea always wins. You wake to shouting, but not the usual kind. Not the daily holler of the bosun yelling at someone for coiling a rope incorrectly, or the cook yelling at a rat, or a sailor yelling at his own foot for going numb. This is urgent shouting. Fast, sharp, cutting across the deck like a knife. You sit up, instantly awake, and try to find the source. Above, the sails luffing, snapping hard in the wind, and the sky looks wrong. Not storm wrong, colour wrong, orange, sickly, like fire through fog. Then the bell rings 3 times. That's not a shift change. That's not a drill. That's fire. It spreads fast, faster than you can believe. Someone's shouting, "Galley!" and "Spark!" and then the word that makes your blood freeze solid, "Below." Fire on a ship is the stuff of nightmares. Wooden boards soaked in pitch, hemp rope hanging in bundles like kindling, tar-sealed barrels lined up like fuel. You don't need a fire on a ship, you are the fire. You run, everyone runs, and the world is suddenly chaos. The smoke hits first, thick, hot and choking. It floods up from the lower decks like something alive. You see the cook stagger out from the hatch, coughing so hard he can't speak. Soot streaked across his forehead. Behind him, orange flickers in the dark. You're too late to stop it. The galley's already gone. Buckets, buckets everywhere. A line forms, fast and frantic, from the side of the ship to the hatch. You're grabbing seawater, tossing it down into the smoke, coughing so hard your chest hurts. The nobleman is nowhere to be seen. His servant appears briefly, eyes wide, hands fluttering uselessly. He vanishes just as fast. The fire's angry, it roars as it finds dry wood, belching smoke and sparks. Somewhere below, something cracks loudly. A support beam? A barrel? Doesn't matter. You can't see, you just throw water again and again, hands blistered, breath burning. A sailor screams, not from pain, from rage. His hammock's gone. His pack, everything he owned, reduced to smoke and ash in less than 10 minutes. The fire takes 30 minutes to kill. 30 minutes of raw, choking terror. You think about jumping overboard more than once just to breathe. But finally, the last bucket is tossed, the last smouldering edge is stamped out, and the air begins to clear. The damage is bad, 2 men are hurt, and 1 badly, the cook's hands are burned, half the food stores are ruined, the galley is blackened and useless, the ladder to the lower deck is scorched through, the whole ship smells like roasted despair. You sit on the deck, trembling, shirt soaked, hands shaking. Your mouth tastes like ash. You feel like you've aged a year. Here's your harsh historical truth. Fires on ships were horrifyingly common. With open flames used for cooking, heating and light, and everything around made of dry wood or rope, it didn't take much. 1 overturned oil lamp, 1 coal kicked loose, boom! Some fires were caused by lightning, some by sabotage, some probably by bad luck and worse biscuits. And once the fire started, you had buckets. That was it. No fire hoses, no extinguishers, no backup. You used seawater and prayer, and most of the time you lost. The fringe fact? In some superstitions, a ship fire was seen as a warning. Not just a disaster, but a punishment. A sign that the ship was cursed. Or worse, that a witch was aboard. You hear whispers of it now. The old sailor, the one who still carries garlic in his boot, starts muttering about the woman again. The banana curse comes up, again. You want to laugh, but it's not funny. Later, the captain surveys the damage with eyes like stone. No yelling, no blame, just orders. Ration everything. Check the water barrels, clean what you can. You're sent below to see what survived. It's worse than you thought. The galley is charred black. The grain sacks are scorched on one side. A barrel of salted fish exploded. A good half of the biscuits are now solid bricks of smoke and mould. The remaining supplies are shoved into one corner, pitifully small. The ship has no kitchen now. No fire for cooking. You'll be eating cold rations from here on out. Hardtack, dried fruit, if any. And salted meat so tough it might technically be wood. Morale plummets. The injured men groan through the night. The cook sits beside them, wrapping burned hands in strips of linen. You offer to help. He shakes his head. No worse than last time, he says. You don't ask what last time was. Sleep is impossible. The heat from the deck still radiates through the boards. The smoke hangs in the air, refusing to leave. You lie on your back, staring at the beams above, wondering how close you came to being roasted alive in your hammock. There's a debate among the crew about how the fire started. One theory blames a rat. Another says the cook dropped a coal while swatting a fly. A third insists someone was sneaking a smoke near the lamp oil. The bosun grumbles something about sabotage, but no one can prove anything. You do know this. Next time you smell cloves and velvet, you're hiding your flint. The next morning you wake up hungry, and that's a problem, because there's barely enough food now. No hot meals, no stew, just dry things and cold meat and a faint hope that the voyage ends soon. The captain calls for new rationing, 2 meals per day, half portions, water strictly counted. The crew grumbles, loudly. One man tries to sneak extra from a barrel. He's caught. No punishment, just a stare from the captain that freezes everyone else in place. You learn how to eat like a prisoner. Slowly, methodically. You chew hardtack until your jaw clicks. You suck on a dried fig for 10 minutes just to make it last. You trade a chunk of meat for someone's bit of cheese rind and feel like you've scored a treasure. You watch as the nobleman's servant still delivers his meals, warm somehow. You wonder if they smuggled a brazier on board. You wonder how long that secret will last before the crew turns on them. By midday, someone carves a new phrase into the mast. We float, we burn, we rot. Nobody laughs, not this time. You start dreaming of water. Not the ocean, fresh water. Cold, clear, pouring from a jug, splashing in a basin, running down your face, your arms, your cracked lips. The dream is always the same. You're standing in a quiet grove, cupping your hands beneath a spring, drinking until your belly swells, until your throat stops aching, until your body feels human again. Then you wake up. And you're thirsty. The kind of thirsty that makes your tongue feel like rope. Your lips peel when you rub them. Your spit, what little remains, has the consistency of paste. The ration barrel's been guarded like treasure for days now. And today the ladle doesn't reach the bottom. There's a silence when the last clang echoes, a sound like finality. The water is gone. You know it before anyone says it. The captain announces it officially. Voice flat, eyes harder than toia never. The fire must have boiled off more than expected. A barrel was cracked, maybe, leaked. Or maybe someone took more than their share. It doesn't matter. There's 1 half-full cask left, that's it. And there's no rain in sight. Rationing turns brutal. No more washing, no tea, no cooking. Just sips. Measured, counted, rationed to the drop. One ladle in the morning, one at sunset, maybe. You hear sailors whispering about licking condensation off the inner walls of the hold. One man talks about squeezing juice from the meat. Someone else, joking, not joking, asks if chickens sweat. No one answers. Even Gertie has gone quiet. Your throat becomes a battleground. Every swallow feels like dragging a pine cone down your esophagus. You don't talk much anymore. No one does. Conversation dries up, replaced by looks. Sharp, suspicious, sunken. The nobleman, of course, still drinks. You see it one afternoon. You're passing near the stern when you hear the unmistakable glug of a paw and glance through the slightly open door to his cabin. There, on the small wooden table, is a pitcher, ceramic blue, and a silver cup. He raises it. Drinks slowly. You freeze. His servant sees you. For 1 second, the whole world holds its breath. Then he closes the door. You tell no one. Not because you're afraid, but because the crew doesn't need a reason to break just yet. Historically, water shortages were among the most terrifying aspects of long sea voyages. Medieval ships carried fresh water in wooden barrels, which were prone to rot, leaks, and contamination. Sometimes the water went green. Sometimes it smelled like death. Sometimes you got lucky, and it just tasted like wood. Sailors drank it anyway. And the weird part, some captains preferred beer or weak wine over water, even for daily hydration. The alcohol slowed bacterial growth. Didn't make it good, but at least it didn't kill you immediately. But if those stores ran out, you were in trouble. Desperate measures come faster. The cook begins boiling seawater in a makeshift still using salvaged galley scraps. Copper, a coil of pipe, a cracked pot lid. It works, sort of. The result is a trickle, enough to fill a cup every few hours. Barely worth the fire risk, but it gives the crew hope, and hope is as precious as water now. You take your turn watching it boil, timing it like a sacred ritual. The steam curls up, condenses, drips slowly into a cracked ceramic bowl. Guard that bowl like it's gold. Some nights the heat is so unbearable you consider drinking straight from the sea. You know it'll make you sick, raving, vomiting, hallucinating, but your body doesn't care. It begs. Anything wet. You hold out, barely, then comes the rain trick. There's an old sailor who claims he can call rain by singing. You scoff at first, then you hear him humming. Low, off-key, rhythmic. Every morning at dawn he sings a simple tune, 4 notes, over and over. You start to hum it too, not because you believe, but because it's something to do. Half the crew joins in. It becomes your rain prayer, desperate, pathetic, beautiful. The skies remain clear. But then, one evening, just before dusk, you feel it. A drop. Tiny. Cold. On the back of your hand. You stare at it like a miracle. Then another. Then 5. Then a dozen. When someone yells, "Sailcloth!" and suddenly the deck explodes with motion. Tarps are pulled. Barrels flipped. Arms raised to the sky. Everyone's laughing, shouting, running, stumbling. You lift your face and open your mouth wide. The first real water in days pours down your tongue and it tastes like heaven. The rain is light but steady. Enough to fill the buckets and pots and pans and the cook's helmet. The nobleman emerges briefly, his hat replaced with a scarf, holding his own pitcher high like a priest collecting blessings. No one questions him now, not today. The water is for everyone. You soak your shirt and wring it into your mouth. You lie on the deck, letting the droplets hit your skin, imagining they're washing away the stink, the thirst, the madness. You don't care that it's cold. You don't care that your clothes are heavy. You could cry. You probably do. Even Gertie gets a drink. The next day, things are still tense, but no better. The water barrels aren't full, but they're wet. The crew's eyes are less hollow. The humming continues. Not just for rain now, for rhythm, for sanity. A scholar once wrote that a ship without water is like a body without blood, capable of motion, but doomed to die slowly. You felt that truth, you tasted it. And now, you've survived another thirst. It sneaks up on you slowly, like most horrors at sea, not with a scream, but with a quiet twitch. At first, you think it's just someone being dramatic, a sailor muttering nonsense, scratching too hard, staring too long at the boards. You've seen worse, everyone's lost it a little by now. Especially after the fire and the water shortage and the general slow collapse of reality that comes with floating in a damp wooden box for weeks. But this is different. It starts with the carpenter. He's sharpening a chisel like always, rhythmically, like he's done every day for the past month. Then he stops. Just stops. Sits there, holding the chisel like it's made of fire. His eyes are locked on something you can't see. You call his name, nothing. Someone else calls it louder. Still, nothing. Then slowly he turns and says, "The ship is whispering to me." You laugh nervously. He doesn't. That night, he tries to sleep under the stairs, says it's where the wood is quieter. The captain says nothing at first. He's seen this before. They all have. One by one, little cracks start showing in the crew. Men who've been solid, reliable, even funny, now suddenly moody, jittery, speaking in half sentences. One sailor spends an hour staring at his own hands. Another refuses to eat unless someone else tastes his food first. You catch one man crying while trying to tie a knot. The rope slips again and again, and he just keeps crying, like his brain has short-circuited on something simple. It's called the sea madness. They don't say it out loud. No one ever does, but you hear the whispers at night. He's gone fish-brained. She's in the deep now. Too many weeks, too little sky. Here's the historical reality. Extended voyages in medieval times were not just physically punishing. They could tear the mind apart. Sailors dealt with isolation, monotony, hunger, dehydration, lack of sleep, and constant anxiety. Often in tightly confined spaces without privacy, distraction, or even a clear sense of where they were. It's no wonder many cracked. Some called it melancholia. Others simply referred to it as the ghost hour. It didn't have a name. It didn't need one. Everyone knew. And here's the fringe fact. Some medieval captains carried small pouches of herbs and stones blessed by priests to ward off mind rot. One recipe called for rosemary, amethyst, and dried eel skin. Another suggested sleeping with a peeled onion under your bed. You'd try it if you had any onions, or a bed. Your own descent is slower. At first it's little things, you forget what day it is. Not unusual, but then you start forgetting other things. What month, what port you last left, whether it's morning or evening. You'll be sitting on deck staring at the sky, and you'll suddenly realise you don't remember what you were doing before. Your hands ache, your mouth is dry, you've been sitting there for hours. You try to talk to the cook about it. He shrugs. Thinking too much. Try thinking less. Great advice. You try, you do. You distract yourself with chores, stories, repairs. But everything feels too loud or too slow or like it's happening to someone else. You find yourself staring at the horizon for long stretches, convinced you see islands that vanish when you blink. At night, you hear creaking that sounds like voices. Your name, even. You write it off as the wind. Then the voices come below deck. Then inside your head. One morning, you wake up and can't remember where you are. Not in the I'm groggy way, in the real way, the scary way. You look around the ship and none of it feels familiar. You don't recognise the men you've slept beside for weeks. You look at your own boots and they feel like someone else's. Your own hands don't look quite right. That passes after an hour, but the fear doesn't. And here's the scholarly debate. Was sea madness a true psychological condition or a combination of symptoms from scurvy, dehydration and trauma? Some argue it was simply undiagnosed mental illness, made worse by harsh conditions. Others believe the environment itself, closed quarters, lack of stimulus and constant physical stress could induce psychosis in otherwise healthy men. You don't care which camp is right, you just know it's real. The nobleman cracks next. At first he's quiet, withdrawn. Then he starts pacing the deck at night, barefoot, muttering about maps and stars and a second sun. His servant tries to keep him indoors, but he refuses. He talks about colours that don't exist, about music no one else hears. He starts painting symbols in wine on the deck. The crew stops looking at him. He's become a walking omen. The captain finally steps in, not with force, but with a kind of sad acceptance. The nobleman is confined to his cabin. The servant stands guard, but every night you hear him talking to the walls, not shouting, just talking, calmly, like they're old friends. The carpenter, meanwhile, insists the ship is trying to leave the water. He's not allowed near tools anymore. One sailor disappears for 3 hours. Turns out he was just sitting under a tarp staring at a mould spot. When they found him, he said it was almost a door. The cook stops seasoning the food. Says the spices are talking back. You somehow manage to hold on, barely. Maybe because you write things down. Maybe because you've learnt to keep part of yourself quiet. Maybe because after all the madness, the noise, the fear, the stink and the hunger, you found a kind of rhythm in it. A terrible, uncomfortable, hypnotic rhythm. You sleep, you wake, you eat, you mend ropes, you clean, you scratch, you dream of water again. But now, when you dream, you hear voices, and sometimes they know your name. It begins with gulls. Not the sound of them, that would be too poetic, but the smell. You wake up to a breeze that carries something new, something strange, something you haven't smelled in weeks. Damp leaves, wet clay, smoke. You sit up slowly, blinking away the crust of sleep and madness, and inhale deeply. Land. You're still hours from it, maybe even a day, depending on the wind, but the nose knows. You scramble up to the deck just in time to hear the lookout shout, "Tree line ahead!" and then the whole crew waves like they've just remembered they're alive. There's no cheering, no dramatic rush to the bow, just a deep, bone-weary exhale shared by everyone, a kind of unspoken release. Your feet feel lighter, your chest feels wider. Even the ship seems to groan in relief. She knows her work is almost done. The coastline starts to sharpen throughout the day, first a jagged smear, then cliffs, then green hills and forested slopes like brush strokes on a foggy canvas. Civilization is still out of sight, but it feels close. You see birds now, proper land birds, not the ocean skimmers. One even lands on the rigging. The crew stares at it like it might speak. Then the whispers start. Where are we? What port is this? Will there be food? No one answers. No one dares. The sea doesn't like certainty. You spot the nobleman that afternoon standing at the stern with his servant beside him. He looks thinner, paler. Whatever grand mission brought him aboard, it seems to have shriveled up inside his silk coat. He sees you, offers the smallest of nods. You nod back. Just once. That's all either of you can manage. The ship tacks slowly toward the inlet. The captain doesn't speak much, but you can see the tension in his shoulders. Landings can be just as dangerous as storms. Shallow reefs, hidden rocks, currents, pulling where they shouldn't. These things have eaten more ships than pirates ever did. Even now, as the green coast glows under the late sun and the wind carries smells you'd almost forgotten. Cows, maybe? Mud? Is that bread? You know the sea could still change her mind. All it would take is one broken line, one missed signal. One gust of wind at the wrong moment. But she doesn't. Not today. The harbour appears at dusk, tucked in a natural crescent, ringed by low hills and a dozen sagging moss-covered buildings that look like they've been through their own battles. It's no bustling city. It's more of a scrappy trading outpost, half mud, half hope. The dock is crooked. The planks creak under the breeze before you've even touched them. But it's land. Sweet, solid, not moving land. Here's your historical fact, final edition. Medieval ports varied wildly in size and safety. Some were nothing more than hastily built piers, guarded by suspicious locals. Others were fortified harbours controlled by guilds or nobles. Depending on where you arrived, you could be welcomed with bread and ale, or a drawn sword and a list of taxes longer than the dock itself. You're not sure what to expect here. The place looks poor but not hostile. Fishermen mill about, stacking pots and coiling nets. Children chase each other barefoot along the shore. A dog barks at the sea as if it's offended him personally. No one hails your ship, no one waves. The captain lowers anchor just off the dock and gives orders for the longboat to be lowered. A few crew members will go ashore first to handle negotiations, translation, bribes, declarations, and whatever paperwork counts for customs out here. You're not chosen, you're just told to wait. The ship will dock in the morning, assuming no one gets stabbed overnight. Night falls. It's the last night aboard. You don't sleep, not because you're scared, but because some part of you, against all logic, has started to miss this place already. This disgusting, creaking, lice-infested, salt-soaked slab of misery has become familiar. You learned how to live here, how to survive here, how to not go entirely insane. The idea of leaving it feels like letting go of a particularly violent old friend. You lie in your hammock staring up at the beams and try to remember what day it is, what month, what version of yourself stepped aboard back then. You were softer, cleaner, maybe even dumber. You thought it would be an adventure. You thought the hard part would be storms and pirates. No one told you the real danger was being bored to madness by your own thoughts. that the hardest thing wouldn't be staying alive, it would be staying yourself. And now, you're still here, ragged, yes, scarred probably, but whole, mostly. There's a final superstition passed among sailors for the last night before land. Don't speak the name of the shore, don't say home, don't say the port's name, don't speak of what you'll do or eat or drink once you're there. It's said that the sea hears, and if she feels you're ungrateful, she might take it back. So you keep your mouth shut. Everyone does. Even the cook, who has already packed his knives in a stained cloth. Even the boatswain, who mutters insults in his sleep. Even the nobleman, whose cabin has gone silent since sunset. You sit with the others in the dark, passing a bottle of something strong and possibly poisonous. Toasting with nods instead of words. You're almost there, you've done it. Here's your fringe fact. Some sailors left ships after voyages like this and never touched the sea again. They'd settle in the nearest town, find work hauling barrels, marry the first person who looked at them sideways. Not because they found love or purpose, but because they survived. And after that, they wanted to be as far from the ocean as possible. But others signed up for another ship within a week. Couldn't stand the quiet of land, couldn't sleep without the creak of timbers, couldn't breathe without salt on their lips. You're not sure yet which one you'll be, but as the moon rises over the hills and the ship rocks gently on her final night, you think, maybe, just maybe, you'll miss it. Not the hunger, not the rats, not the carpenter who thinks the ship is whispering poetry, but this strange, floating world, the rhythm of it, the stubbornness, the survival. You fall asleep with your boots on, one hand resting on the railing, and dream, not of water or food or land, but of sails, and the sound of wind in the rigging. And that's it. Your boots hit dry land the next morning, but you barely feel it. The dock sways beneath your feet, your legs still tuned to the rhythm of waves, your spine still half curled like you're bracing for the deck's next lurch. People walk past like they've never stared down their own slow decay while eating dried peas for 6 straight days. You want to shake them and say, "Do you even know what I've been through?" But you don't. You just breathe. The smells hit you like a wall, mud, manure, meat cooking somewhere nearby. It's not clean, it's not glamorous, but it's land, and for now, that's enough. The captain nods a brief farewell. The cook offers you a half-rotted onion like it's a Medal of Honor. Even Gertie, poor chicken survivor of a truly chaotic voyage, is sold at the port for 2 copper coins and a wink. Life moves on, you walk, you find an inn, a bed, a basin of lukewarm water that feels like holy baptism. You wash the salt from your skin and scrub until you look slightly less haunted. Then you collapse into a bed that doesn't sway. No ropes overhead, no rats, no groaning timbers, just quiet. And in the quiet you think about the ship, the one that made you, broke you, and carried you through hellish seas, bad food, ghost stories, superstitions, and that one guy who tried to marry the mast. You think about what it means to live like that. To sleep, eat, and work at sea, not as a soldier or an explorer or a hero, but just as a human trying to get from one piece of land to another without dying. You did that. Sweet dreams, sailor.